I was 18 at the time. I just graduated high school, and what was probably a really exciting and memorable time for most people was a stressful race against time for me. You see, my dad was very traditional. If I were going to be living in his house after high school, even just over the summer between graduation and college, I needed a job. If not, I was freeloading, and he swore with an adamance I certainly didn't care to test that I'd be out in the street if I was unemployed for long. I'd had months of preparation, hell, years really. This entire time I could have been looking. He certainly hadn't waited until now to clue me in on the terms of living with him after high school, but I just wasn't the type to care that much about anything until I was days from a deadline. Finding a job back then wasn't easy. I dyed my hair green, and my nose and lips were pierced, not to mention the gauges and the shitty stick and poke snake on my forearm that my 16-year-old self had inflicted upon me. Case in point, I wasn't getting hired most places, and being that I had about a week at that time left to figure it all out, like usual, I was in a mad scramble to line something up before facing the consequences. But then, as if some morbid miracle, a cop got shot and killed on 84th Avenue, pretty close to the Passingo out there, and an opening for the night shift position appeared not long after. The Passingo, and 84th Avenue as a whole, had a pretty bad reputation. See, 84th was one of the only roads in town still unpaved at parts, namely the north end, shortly after the Passingo, and it wound along a pretty deep drainage ditch where no guardrails had ever been built, even after decades of complaints. There was a particularly tight bend up the road where a lot of drunk drivers and speedy teens learned that they were not in fact invincible. Some of them even taking that lesson to the grave with them. And the lack of streetlights just made it all the more dangerous. But those were just the logical concerns. In a tiny town like mine, people are bored enough to run with sensational bullshit. So 84th could never just be a dangerous road with poor construction and lack of safety measures to blame, but was instead cursed and haunted. People died there so often, not because it was just a hazardous roadway, but because it was bloodthirsty, evil. People's reception went out on the road, not because it was essentially the furthest you could be from town, but because some malicious entity wanted you isolated. You get it. The woods beyond the ditch were even worse. On 3 occasions since the turn of the century, bodies were found out there. 1 a suicide, and 2 in shallow graves. And in a town as small as mine had been, that's a pretty sizable number. For a criminal, though, it only made sense to bury them there. Again, this place was basically abandoned and totally secluded. Really, the only other people that far northwest of town were the waggies at the Passingo, and they weren't getting paid enough to be on the lookout for anything. Not to mention, they had their own weirdness to deal with. All sorts of strange and illegal activities happened in that pothole-ridden parking lot, and why wouldn't it? That place was the last beacon of humanity's presence in the town for miles, until you got to 90th Street, the main road shooting off from the highway. So anybody working there had enough going on at their own doorstep and wouldn't be paying any attention to cars pulled off on the side of the road with mysteriously heavy duffel bags in the trunk. Suffice it to say, once the position opened, I was the only person in town out of options enough to drop off an application. And wouldn't you know it, I was scheduled to start 2 days later. I picked it up quick. The job was easy, and though at first I was shadowing a guy that by all accounts could have been undead, I was left to my own devices a week later. To be honest, I actually kind of liked the job at first. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. were pretty standard times of consciousness for me anyway, and working the graveyard shift finally gave me an excuse to sleep in until 3. It was dead most nights. Sometimes, and I'm not exaggerating, I literally didn't see a single customer. And other nights, the goofiness of my interactions with various druggies kept things interesting. But those kind of nights aren't what this story is about. The first time I remember being pretty confused was only 2 weeks after I started the job. I was pretty stoned at the time, so I tensed up when I saw a cop walking towards the door. But I wasn't complacent enough to blaze it before work without eye drops for fear of these exact situations. Not so much worried about getting arrested, but about what my dad would do to me. I also had a little bit of a heads up in the form of a faulty open sign in the window. The neon would pretty often flicker or dim for some reason when people were coming up to the door. Really couldn't tell you why it happened, but when I was totally fucking off behind the counter, it was my cue to act natural for a minute. And since a bunch of random bullshit was stacked up on the side of the counter to my left facing the parking lot and the pumps, I could never see out of the windows unless I was actively looking over it, so needless to say, whatever was wrong with that sign certainly wasn't something I was going to try and get fixed. When the cop walked in, I sort of leaned back as casually as possible and tried to make small talk with him so his mind wouldn't wander anywhere else.
See any crazies?
Not yet,
He answered, perusing the energy drinks like a selection of fine wines. He sounded pretty bored, and I hoped that wasn't an indication that he was looking for something to do.
Well, lucky you. Can't say the same myself.
Yeah?
He settled on a sugar-free monster. He walked over to the counter, and I remember thinking he was either a new guy or one of those officers that have just never stopped being motivated, going off his short hair and fresh fade. Though judging off of how young he looked, definitely early 20s, I was going with the former. These were the worst types of cops from my experience. They're always looking for a way to stand out to their higher-ups.
Yeah. Saw a lady sleeping in a shopping cart out back. Asked her why the shopping cart, and she said she learned from a TV show that you should never sleep on the bare ground. You learn something new every day.
He actually smiled slightly.
Weirdos, man.
Yeah. Will that be all?
Yeah.
$3.29.
He tapped his card on the reader, and while the sale processed, I remember actually feeling slightly concerned for the guy. I wasn't a big fan of cops, but one of them had died around here recently, after all, and just talking with this guy face to face sort of humanized him to me. As he cupped the top of the drink and slid it off the counter, I said,
Stay safe out there.
He glanced at me and raised an eyebrow.
You know something I don't.
Nah, just, that cop that got shot out here a couple of weeks ago.
Huh?
I just stared at him.
Listen,
He peered at my name tag for a second.
Carter, you can't believe everything you hear about this place. 84th Avenue. It's just a street, man. Most of what you hear about this place is embellished or even totally made up.
Yeah, alright. Well, have a good night, officer.
I paused, squinting at his name tag back.
Brady?
He walked off into the night, his energy drink in his hand. At the time, I didn't give the interaction a whole lot of thought. I learned most of my news from memes, and it was definitely possible I'd been wrong. Unlikely, but possible. But over time, stranger things began to occur. And I'm not talking about druggies sleeping in shopping carts. I began to pick up on an anomaly with the neon sign. See, it actually didn't flicker very often. It seemed to at first, but after getting caught off guard multiple times by random people coming in, I realized I couldn't trust it as much as I thought I could. Yet strangely, it was seeming consistent. I realized it always blinked and dimmed for certain people. There was this lady, that would come in about once a week and buy a scratch-off ticket. I figured she had been pretty depressed because she was always wearing the same clothes and was coming to this dingy-ass place with relative frequency. Every time she asked for the same ticket, Cash Kaiser, and every time I slid it to her, she smiled at me and say, "Maybe tonight's the night." Even in her voice, I could hear how much she needed a break. But I guess tonight was never the night, because a week or two later, she'd always be back. Always dressed the same, always buying a colorful strip of false hope that things would suddenly change for her. I tried to chat with her the more she came in, but she wasn't keen on giving away details about her life. She was mostly unresponsive, just nodding or giving me one-word answers, and then she'd head out in kind of a hurry. But her clothes weren't the only thing that stayed the same every time. Every single time she came into the pass and go, the sign would flicker. Now, I could have just been reading into things too much. I wondered if the sign was ultimately connected to a wire through the ground maybe, and maybe certain people were stepping over it, and those people just kind of came in the same way every time. I didn't really know. I'm not an electrician, but the sort of Groundhog Day that transpired every time she stopped by really did intrigue me. Then, one night in early July, I had another curious experience. I was listening to some podcast about ayahuasca and contemplating if I'd ever take the plunge, when the green flicker of my inconsistent early warning system caught my attention. And when my eyes trailed from the neon sign and over the merchandise on the counter to the pumps out in the dark beyond, I saw a guy pumping gas into his truck, probably in his mid-30s. He had this really gruff look on his face, but I wouldn't have paid him much mind except for the fact someone was with him. A girl about my age. While he was by the pump, she was heading into the store. She had black hair down to about her shoulders and these big brown eyes. Her skin was kind of pale, like she probably didn't get out much, and she wore skinny jeans and a gray top. As soon as I noticed her approaching, I stepped back from the window. I definitely didn't want to creep her out by being seen peeking over the counter through the glass. She came in, and as the chime above the door rang, I couldn't help but glance at her as she beelined to the snacks. She was cute, and I was considering flirting with her at first, but then I glanced over the counter again at the guy in the parking lot, presuming him to be her big brother or dad or something. I didn't want to piss him off, so I decided to keep it casual. She was over the coolers on the back wall the next time I found her, not looking my direction while she scanned our selection of sports drinks. Then she grabbed a red Gatorade and came walking up to the front. She put the drink in the bag of classic Lay's on the counter, and when I noticed it was almost 4 a.m, I couldn't help but inquire,
What's got you out so late?
I was scanning the items with muscle memory, my eyes meeting hers after she glanced at the counter for a second as if considering a response.
Nothing really.
Big bro?
I flicked my eyes to the guy in the parking lot, and at this, her nose wrinkled.
Ew, no.
I thought that was a strange response.
Ew.
I asked as the total popped up on the screen.
Is it gross to have a brother?
It's gross to kiss your brother.
She smiled flatly, and I didn't want to seem creepy, but I couldn't help but to get up on my tiptoes for a second peek at him again. No doubt the guy was in his 30s, and if I had to be more specific, I'd be leaning more toward late 30s than early. He was wearing boots, jeans, and a blue and brown flannel, and had a 5 o'clock shadow I could see from the store. The more I looked at him, the more weirded out I felt. But then again, none of this was my business, and I didn't want to pry. She definitely didn't seem to be with him against her will.
Ah, gotcha.
I smiled, but the whole thing felt unignorably off to me as she handed me a 10.
You guys going on a road trip or something?
Something like that.
There was this turbulent mix of emotions in her eyes, and while she looked excited, definitely thrilled about something. She also kind of seemed to be longing too. I only got a glimpse of it though, as she unexpectedly asked,
You ever just do something totally crazy, like overnight?
I mean, I took a heroic dose of shrooms once on a whim, without a trip sitter.
I smirked, and she chuckled too, but shook her head.
I didn't mean something like that. Anyway, have a good rest of your night.
You too.
I remarked, but as she turned and walked away, I felt a steadily increasing urge to say something, to ask her why she was with this guy that like he could be her dad, to inquire more about this crazy, overnight thing she was hinting at, or this road trip-esque adventure she was on that had her at this infamous gas station at 4 in the morning. But I was just too immature at the time, and selfish. Even feeling like I should probably investigate what was happening, probably pay more attention to what was going on, I also felt like I really couldn't be bothered. I told myself that it wasn't my business, that I shouldn't be nosy, but really, I just didn't want to get involved. Though, a moment after she left the store, my curiosity got the better of me again, and I peered over the cigarettes at the truck in the parking lot. She was already inside, and at first, it looked pretty unassuming. It was old and kind of a faded red, with 2x4s in the back under a blue tarp. All in all, nothing suspicious. But when he got to the turnoff onto 84th, and he took a right, I noticed the passenger side window was broken, like it'd been punched out. I couldn't see the girl well this far away, but her being in this older guy's truck with the right window shattered made me feel even stranger about the whole ordeal. Something was definitely off. But at the time, my lazy ass didn't care enough. It was mid-July though, when the veneer of eccentric late-night patrons was shattered forever, and I was forced to see what was really going on. It began with a loud rumbling from the parking lot. I got immediately uncomfortable as some biker douche rolled up, revving his engine like if it were loud enough, I'd give him a discount. Then he climbed off the bike and came stumbling towards the door, the green neon flickering onto him from the window. I could tell just from the counter that he was totally hammered. He could barely even make it inside. He came right to the counter and absolutely reeked of alcohol.
Give me a pack of menthols, Camel.
He slurred, leaning onto the counter with his right hand.
You okay, man?
I grabbed it.
The fuck do you mean?
His hostility freaked me out just as much as it annoyed me.
You're obviously drunk off your ass. You just drove here on a motorcycle. Seems like a bad idea. Shut the fuck up and sell me the cigarettes, man.
He was glaring at me like he was ready to swing. And though he was so fucked up, I don't doubt I could have taken him. He was still a big guy, and it really wasn't worth the trouble.
Your funeral.
I muttered, grabbing the cigarette and noting it was the last pack. Normally, I would have made up some quip about that, but with this guy, I just wanted him to leave. When I slid him the cigarettes, he flung his cash at me and almost walked away without his change. Then he stumbled off, back out the door, shoving it open so hard I wondered if he broke it. And then, without any warning, as he stumbled along the window towards his bike, his entire body changed. My breathing stifled as I noticed his head was dented in. Multiple of his teeth were missing and blood ran down his face and soaked his jacket. He was covered from head to toe in cuts and scrapes, and his right arm was broken, the bone jutting out slightly. I stumbled back and tripped, knocking over the vape pens, then almost slipped onto them as I scrambled to my feet and chased him out the door, staring in horrified bewilderment as he climbed onto a waterlogged motorcycle, the front of it totally wrecked.
Hey! Man, are you alright?
He just looked at me. And as he stared into my eyes, His look was totally different than before. He wasn't angry or confrontational or even drunk. He just had this totally sober look of regret. He stared at me a moment longer, then he revved his engine, and somehow he and his obliterated bike sped off into the night, leaving me totally alone in the flickering neon. And then as soon as he disappeared up the road, the sign stopped blinking, steadily shining like usual. I sprinted over to the doors, yanking them open and almost collapsing as I barreled into the back room and landed in a seat at the computer. I pulled up the security camera footage and rewound it a couple of minutes, desperate to see if somehow, some inconceivable way, I'd just been seeing things. But though I was willing to believe he wasn't actually injured, and it was somehow all in my head, I wasn't at all prepared for the sight of me just talking to the empty air. The guy never even came in at all. I rewatched my harsh reaction to the absent revving of his engine, my eyes following nothing walking along the window to the door that never opened. Then I realized that I never actually grabbed the pack of menthols. My hand stopped over it and handed nothing to no one. It was the same thing for the cash register. And then at last, I watched myself stumble back and fall, flinging shit everywhere in a panic. I ran out the door, screaming into the night, but only I was there. It filled me with terror so paralyzing, I almost just left right then and there. I sat there at the desk for a moment, shaking. Was I hallucinating? I heard you could get permanent schizophrenia like psychosis from psilocybin, but this was the first and only time I'd ever hallucinated when not on the shit. And as I just stared at the monitor, unblinkingly, shaking in place, I really couldn't tell what was more horrific. If I hadn't really seen that, or if I had. But then, my eyes gravitated to the one part of my memory that was corroborated by the cameras. The neon. It was dim, and as I unpaused the video, I watched it continue to flicker, all the way until my eyes turned on the end of 84th that I could see. And as soon as they did, it shined like normal again. I rewound the footage again, and sure enough, as I began to react to the phantom motorcycle, the sign started flickering. It flickered the whole time throughout the whole interaction until the biker was gone. So, I wasn't crazy. Something suggested there was more going on than me just losing my shit. But then, what the hell had just happened? I didn't even go back to the front as I began racking my mind for all the other times the sign had flickered. And instantly, I recalled the scratch-off lady. I quickly Googled 84th Avenue deaths, thinking that maybe I could identify some of these people. But the first thing that came up was the police officer shooting. Then my jaw dropped as I stared into the memorialized eyes of Officer Brady. I could barely sit still as his eyes looked back at me from the computer screen. The same officer I had spoken to just a month ago who didn't know about any officer shootings in the area. But he was the officer that would be shot. I kept looking, and before long, I found the scratch-off lady. She was some lonely divorced woman that committed suicide in the woods a couple of miles north from here in 2011. And the biker had crashed into the ditch right off the bend 3 years ago. One of many drunk drivers that didn't react to the turn in time and went face first into the canal. I screamed as the chime above the door sounded, and I heard someone spin around at the front door, startled by my reaction. I scrambled to my feet and walked up to the front, freezing as my eyes were met with those of Officer Brady's. glinting in the flickering neon.
You good?
He seemed to be both concerned and frustrated. I just stared at him, totally unable to speak.
Yeah.
You on something?
He peered.
No.
He looked at me a little longer, but then he walked his immortalized path through the gas station, his gaze drifting over the cooler of energy drinks. I couldn't help but stare right at him, utterly wordless as he moved in almost the exact same way as he had back in June, at last grabbing the same sugar-free monster. Then he walked to the counter, and my hands were shaking as I took the drink from him.
Hey, you alright?
I stared into the eyes of the dead man.
Personal stuff.
Is something going on? It looked like you were looking at the security camera footage when I came in.
He nodded, and I listened in silence.
If someone's prowling around here, I could investigate.
I wanted to address what was really happening, to pick his mind and to see if he was really unaware that he was dead, or if he was just haunting this place and all of this was an act. Then I began to wonder if maybe this was some kind of time machine, if I could warn him about what was bound to happen to him and prevent him from dying in the first place. But as I recalled the biker's corpse mounting his waterlog Harley, I came to the conclusion that nothing I said to the suspicions of the officer was going to save his life. And I further waged. As soon as he walked out that door, he'd be a corpse too.
You there?
He waved his hand in front of my face.
Talk to me, kid. You look like you've seen a ghost.
I almost laughed.
Yeah. I'm fine.
I slid him his drink.
You gonna tell me the total?
It's free tonight on me. Have a good one, Officer Brady.
He blinked. He stood there for a moment as if considering investigating the gas station regardless of my cooperation, trying to get to the bottom of my unusual behavior. And maybe in life, he would have. But his faithful march to the street, where his life would be taken from him, seemed programmed to resume as he suddenly turned and walked out the door, just like he had the last time back in June, taking his energy drink with him. I followed him outside, standing beneath the fluctuating sign as my eyes fell onto the exit wounds in his back, the red streaks oozing from the holes in his uniform. I felt like I could cry at the sight of it. I walked back inside and had made my mind up to quit then and there. I wrote up a note and left it in the manager's office. Then I locked the place up and left the key under the propane cylinder exchange out front, about to text my morning relief where the key was when I froze. I remembered the girl with the black hair and big brown eyes. The neon sign that I had once thought was my early warning customer alert and now understood to be some kind of paranormal detection radar had flickered with her interest too, just like it had for the biker and the scratch-off lady. And Officer Brady. In that moment, I became weirdly consumed with this desire to know what had happened to her. Maybe it was because I found her cute, or maybe it was because even in the moment that night, something felt horribly off. But for some reason or another, I became totally invested in figuring out what had happened to her, to the point that I decided to unlock the store and stick around. I went back to the computer, but for some reason, though I was able to find information about other people that had died in the area, some of whom I even seen walk into this gas station's very doors in the middle of the night, I was completely unable to find her, and it really ate at me. I went back to the front, and at some point around 5 a.m., but still, I was just searching on my phone for the girl. Though by the time my relief came in at 6 a.m., I still hadn't found shit, and that was my obsession for the next couple of days. When I had exhausted every article about deaths on 84th, I began to wonder if anyone even knew she was dead. So I searched local missing persons, and I looked into all of them, but still, none of them were this girl. It haunted me for days. I began reliving as much of that night as I could, trying to recall every single detail. I could remember her hinting that the guy she was with was her boyfriend, which even then was a red flag. But now, as I remembered that older guy in the parking lot pumping gas in the dark, it filled me with dread. I didn't get that good of a look at him. I could tell he had some stubble and was wearing a flannel, jeans, and boots, but what good was that? As for his truck, I wasn't sure exactly what make or model it was, just that it was red and looked old. I could only assume the punched out glass was the biker's motorcycle, something that had taken place after the girl's death, or more likely, during. Then I remembered her asking me if I had ever done something crazy and overnight. And as I mulled over the words for hours, sitting on the back porch smoking a bowl as the sun set before my shift, I ruminated all the possibilities such a vague statement could mean. But then, when I remembered her saying she was on something like a road trip, it started to click. The guy she was with, her boyfriend, must have been taking her off somewhere, probably far from her home. Maybe they'd been talking online, probably in secret, because no parent would let their kid date a grown-ass man like that, and she seemed to be about 18 like myself. Maybe he'd driven to where she lived, and this big crazy overnight decision she made was climbing into the stranger's vehicle that she'd been tricked into thinking was safe, driving with him for God knows how long as he took her to God knows where. And then they stopped at the Pass and Go on 84th Avenue for gas. At first, that part didn't make much sense to me. Yeah, this place was a couple of miles south of 90th Street, which came right off the highway. But why wouldn't he stop for gas at one of the many gas stations out there closer to the interstate? Though, the more I thought about it, the more I started to piece it together. If this guy really was from out of state and was trying to get her back to his place undetected, it made sense he didn't pull right off the highway to the nearest gas station where cops could be combing through camera footage. Instead, he drove off to the most secluded road in the whole town, 84th Avenue. I started to feel overwhelmed. I had nothing to go off of to narrow my search really, and for all I knew, I'd have to look at the missing persons listings for people in every surrounding state, and maybe even farther than that. I mean, it was just impossible. But at last, saying a prayer to whoever was listening, I typed in the vaguest string of clues I had. Missing girl, brown eyes, black hair, red truck. And then I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. I searched it first in various counties in Iowa. Maybe she was just from a lower part of the state. But when that didn't yield anything, I searched the same census with counties in Missouri at the end, and then Kansas, and then Nebraska. And then, after over an hour of looking, my heart skipped a beat. I saw those big brown eyes looking back at me through my cell phone screen. I clicked on the news article, and there, in her missing persons listing, was unmistakably the girl's face, just like the one in the gas station. I immediately read the article like it was some sort of divine revelation. Her name was Amber Wicker. She would have just turned 18. In fact, her birthday was only 2 months ago, but her disappearance was 4 months ago, which meant that on the night that she actually stepped into the gas station and not the memory I had cohabitated, she was only 17, making the whole thing even more disturbing to me. She was last seen on her front door's Ring camera climbing into a red truck parked across the street almost totally out of frame, but even in a glimpse of it available in the video, I could tell it was the same one when I saw the 2x4s and blue tarp. My heart sank as I watched Amber hurry down the driveway, looking once over her shoulder to the safety of the house she was abandoning, then reaching the truck and climbing into the passenger seat before it took off up the road. I leaned back in the chair, letting out a beleaguered sigh. So, Amber Wicker was her name, and as far as the police knew, she was missing. But I knew she was dead. After all, every customer that had walked in beneath the flickering sign had been a corpse. And as much as I wanted to believe otherwise, I assumed her case wasn't any different. So, as much as I wanted to stop working that place, as much as it bothered me to see those ghosts walking the faded paths of their memories through the purgatory that was the pass and go off 84th Avenue, I had to stay. I had to wait until Amber came back so I could gather enough evidence to give to the police. After all, though some of the dead only came in once, like the biker, others had come in twice like Officer Brady, and even others had came in almost on a weekly basis like the scratch-off lady. Eventually, I hoped she would come back. And so, the rest of July, I picked up more night shifts, desperately wanting to be there the night she hopefully returned. I also chatted with Justin, the guy who I shadowed and who worked nights when I was off, but his brain seemed constantly fried on something, and if he had any paranormal experiences, he hadn't noticed. I asked him about the sign flickering, and he said it did that on occasion, so I knew he's seen at least some ghost. But when I asked him about Amber, he wasn't sure if he had seen her or not. Needless to say, I wasn't getting anything useful out of him. I asked him just to keep his eyes open for her, and if he saw her, to note the license plate of the truck by the pump. You would think such a strange request would raise an eyebrow, but he was so zombified on whatever the hell he was abusing in his off time that he just said, sure. In the weeks after, I'd pinned down Amber's true identity. I began to research her a bit. I could only find 2 articles about her. One was the one I first found, which just had the basic details of her disappearance, and the other was an even smaller article in which her parents had given a statement and a number to call if anyone knew anything. I really wanted to call that number, but I knew that right now, I honestly didn't have shit. I could always say I was at the gas station that night and saw something, but the security camera footage only went back 60 days. So, there'd be no proof one way or the other. I didn't have a license plate, and I was a whole state over. I didn't have a lot of faith the police would be able to do much with that, and I didn't want to give her parents false hope. So, I decided I'd just wait until her memory replayed again, and I could piece together some actionable details. In the meantime, the more I searched her, I was at last able to find some of her socials, but her Instagram was private and her Twitter was inactive for years. Though when I stumbled upon her Facebook, even though it too hadn't had a post uploaded in 2 years, I felt strangely more connected to her as I scrolled through her photos, this immortal anthology of a dead girl's time on Earth, floating in cyberspace for anyone to find, and sharing her memories from before her life was prematurely snuffed out. I found pictures of her laughing with friends, smiling at a dance, and blowing out birthday candles. I saw random posts ranging from her excitedly proclaiming she got her learner's permit to complaining about failing some biology test. All these moments of this girl's life, both significant and insignificant, were here forever. Memories accessible to anyone that cared to find them. And really, her appearance at the gas station wasn't much different. Though the memory was supernatural, unfolding in real time over a real place, it was in essence the same. Just a moment of her existence that unaffiliated people such as myself were able to witness. Though, whether or not I had been the one to see it for a reason, or my witnessing of it was just as inconsequential and random as me scrolling through her Facebook page, I felt that I was part of this girl's story now, and it was my duty to help her however I could. But by August, she still hadn't come back. And strangely, neither had Officer Brady or the biker or even the scratch-off lady. There There was only one other occurrence of the sign flickering, and I guess it was either a no-show ghost or a fuck you from the universe, because no one ended up coming in. I got worried that whatever supernatural phenomenon had been taking place was over just as suddenly as it had begun, and that I'd never see her again, never be given a chance to atone for my apathetic complacency that night when I could have paid more attention to a situation that was obviously suspicious. And even worse, I was shipping off to college in just a couple of weeks. My remaining days at the Pass and Go were numbered. So on August 3rd, while sitting behind the counter in the dead of the night, waiting for the purgatory replay of an apparition's final stop on the drive to her untimely death, I made up my mind. If she didn't come in tonight, then tomorrow, I'd take matters into my own hands. It dawned on me that Amber must have died nearby here. The only ghosts that ever walked into the gas station were those that had died on 84th Avenue. And that was true for Officer Brady, who had been shot just down the road, the biker who had crashed into the canal by the bend, the scratch-off lady who had hanged herself in the woods, and all the others I seen walk through those doors beneath the flickering green glow. And though I had no idea where to look, I had one thing to go off of. I seen the truck turn right at the turnoff. So, somewhere north of here, she must have died. And maybe, just maybe, I could figure out where. By morning, I still hadn't seen her, or any ghost for that matter. And after chattering with Tegan, my morning relief, I walked out to my car. But though I planned on driving home and getting some sleep, then searching later, I just couldn't resist the urge to look right then and there. And so, in my Pass and Go uniform and all, I walked over to the turnoff where I seen the phantom truck head right and then did the same, walking north up the road. The sun was just barely rising over the trees, and I couldn't remember the last time I had appreciated a sunrise. Usually, I sped home, trying to beat the sunlight to my room where I could shut my blackout curtains and crash as if it was still night. Then I wake up at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But this morning, moving slowly up the road along the canal and constantly scanning for anything out of the ordinary, I couldn't help but enjoy the orange glow above the trees. By the time I walked about 2 miles, the sun was fully above the horizon, and cars were starting to sparingly appear on 84th, though admittedly not many, as this wasn't the most direct route to anywhere in town except the Pass and Go. I'd already passed the infamous bend and felt obligated to pause there for a moment before the canal, sort of waiting in a reverent silence as I remembered the stare that the biker had given me, the regret permeating through his eyes. By now, though, it could no longer be considered a canal. It was a drainage ditch at best, a muddy shallow dip off the road, and beyond it was the forest. But then, my steady scan of the ground in front of me, I noticed something twinkling. I crouched, looking down at the small shards of glass on the pavement. Almost like a vision, my mind seemed to play out this simulation, and I was staring at the man as he and Amber argued. He lost his temper and slammed her head into the window, shattering it. I noticed more twinkling coming from the glass before the ditch, and I could almost hear the sound of his boots scraping the asphalt as he caved the glass off down the hill, trying to cover up anything that had happened. Then I noticed something yellow peeking out of the mud. I stepped down into the ditch, grabbing the corner of the plastic and pulling it off its muddy tomb. Sitting in my hand was a faded, dirty bag of Lace Classic, mostly empty, with just a few crumbs at the bottom. My heart raced as I recalled her placing the bag on the counter, and again, I could see it before my mind's eye. The man dragging her body out of the passenger seat, her dead weight foot scraping the bag out with her. He probably didn't even notice in his panic, as he dragged it towards the forest, the bag fluttering off down into the ditch below. I walked up the hill on the other side. I stepped into the forest. My breathing started to become heavy as I walked deeper into the trees, terrified as I anticipated just what nightmare spectacle I might be about to find. But I wouldn't turn back now. And as the afterimage of Amber's conflicted eyes appeared in my mind again, I resolved to find where she was buried so I could finally give her parents peace. Maybe even give her peace. And it didn't take much more walking to find clues. I noticed 2 hardly visible scrapes in the dirt, where her shoes must have been dragging. I carefully followed them, stepping off toward a cluster of trees as they suddenly turned. At last, freezing before what I could immediately ascertain was a shallow grave. The grass all around it was undisturbed, but here, in just this plot, was a clump of uneven earth. Some grass and leaves had been precariously scattered on top in the man's frantic attempt to conceal it, but it wasn't convincing. And as I crouched before the plot, my heart began to thump out of my chest, but I gulped and steeled myself, knowing I had to see this all the way through, for Amber. I wish I had a shovel, but with nothing else, I just dug with my hands, scraping the dirt away and trying not to consider the possibility of my fingers abruptly touching her corpse. I jerked as I felt something that wasn't soil. Didn't feel like rotting flesh. So I brushed the sand away, and my eyes centered upon a filthy blue tarp immersed in the ground. It was all I needed to see. I stayed right there, pulling out my phone and calling the police. And when they arrived within an hour, I told them I'd gone on a morning walk after getting off the graveyard shift, but noticed the broken glass and trash on the side of the road. They applauded me on my intuition, saying they probably wouldn't have found that suspicious at all. And hell, I certainly wouldn't have either, if I hadn't known the context. From there, I said I walked into the forest out of curiosity, but when I found what looked to be a trail left by dragging feet, I became convinced I'd actually found something serious. And after a little bit of digging where the ground looked abnormal, I seen the tarp and assumed the worst. They were kinder than cops had ever been with me, as they thanked me, and in just a couple of days, it was confirmed in a news story that wrapped in that tarp and left to rot in the woods of 84th Avenue for the last half of a year was none other than the body of Amber Wicker. The girl, with black hair and big brown eyes, taking her next big step in life. The last big step she'd ever take. I was glad I'd been able to help her family get some closure, and hell, even led to the arrest of the bastard that killed her, whose DNA was recovered at the scene of the crime. But even still, at the end of the day, none of that would bring her back. I just felt hollow. Finding her body, providing her parents whatever relief they could find, and putting that monster in jail still wouldn't bring that innocent, naive girl back to life. And as I listened to a podcast on the graveyard shift on my last night of work at the Pass and Go, 4 days before I'd be heading off to college, I found myself constantly distracted thinking about that. But slowly, I got my mind off things, paying more attention to the podcast and starting to stare off into space at last, the shift beginning to fly by. Until just after 4 in the morning, I gasped as the neon sign flickered. I darted over to the side of the counter and peered over the cigarettes. I'll never be able to describe the feeling in my chest at the sight of that old red truck. And though I felt ice in my veins at the afterimage of Amber's killer pumping gas in the dark, when I found her walking to the front of the store, all that remained in my heart was an overwhelming longing, an inconsolable despair. She walked into the store, the chime on the ceiling ringing as she headed right over to the snacks. I stared at her undamaged body, her clean black hair, her innocent brown eyes. I became emotional at the sight of it, trying desperately not to cry. She grasped the bag of Lay's. Then, she walked over to the sport drinks, and I leaned against the counter, my chin in my palm, as I gazed at this specter, retracing the final moments of her life, none the wiser to the horrible demise awaiting her 2 miles away. She grabbed the red Gatorade, then walked over to me, and I felt breathless as she approached, unsure of what I'd even say.
Whoa. You alright?
She looked at me, and I must have been hiding how I felt, even worse than I realized.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I lied, scanning the items like a robot. I cleared my throat.
What brings you out here this late?
Nothing, really.
The total came up on the screen.
Big brother.
I limply asked, nudging my head toward the heartless man in the dark.
No.
It's gross to have a brother.
I must have asked the question differently this time, because she stared deeper at me, asking again.
You sure you're okay, dude?
God, I just wanted so badly to tell her to run, to just get the fuck out of here, to never go near that man again. I wanted to tell her that she was about to die, that he was a murderer, that these were the very final minutes of her life. But this was not a time machine. It was no different than that Facebook page from years ago. Just a memory, inexplicably suspended in time. Just a brief expression of her existence that was ephemeral in experience as her time on Earth. And nothing more.
Can I ask you something?
She raised an eyebrow.
Sure.
Have you ever done something totally crazy, just overnight?
She blinked wildly, visibly taken aback by the words.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, I have. Why do you ask?
I shrugged.
No reason.
What about you?
Yeah, I did once. I had this weird inkling to follow a trail into the woods, and I found the body, called the police and reported it.
Creepy.
She remarked. I let out a long sigh, handing her the stuff.
Hey, this is on me tonight, alright?
Oh, sure. How come?
You just look like a friend of mine. A friend I haven't seen in a while. Anyway, it's my treat.
Well, alright, thank you.
She took her unceremonious last meal, then turned over to the door, walking toward the oscillating neon.
Have a good rest of your night, Carter.
She glanced at my name tag, smiling slightly at me. It broke my heart.
You too, Amber.
Huh?
I said, you too.
She stood there a moment, as if debating whether or not she heard me right the first time. Then she turned around and walked outside. But I couldn't just sit there. And before I knew it, I was running around the counter, shoving the doors open and stepping outside. I bit my tongue at the gash on the back of her head, the blood dripping down her hair and onto the back of her top. I had guessed that had been the cause of her death, but evidently, I was wrong. Because as she turned back toward me, I found her face blue and the purplish bruising of a seatbelt around her neck. Her clothes were covered in dirt and blood, and the lace bag was empty and faded, blood clumped all over it. The bottle of Gatorade was halfway empty. I trembled as I found her teary gaze, the desperation and regret straining her painfully cognizant big brown eyes, not innocent anymore.
Thank you.
She whispered. I couldn't possibly muster a response. And then, Amber turned. The the after image of her corpse climbing into the passenger side door of her murderer's truck. I remained frozen in place, my eyes following every last fleeting second of Amber's existence as the taillights glowed and the engine hummed. Then the truck pulled off, pausing at the turnoff. And then, as it pulled away, turning right on 84th Avenue and heading to her shallow grave, the neon sign stopped flickering, leaving me standing there, alone again, in silence. Turn it off. Turn it on! I hate it. My hand slid over to my phone, attempting to tap the dismiss tab as the alarm blared in my apartment room. After missing it twice, I sat up and glared at the phone. My heart spiked.
But 5:25?
I shrieked, jumping into the air and sprinting over to the shower. Yup. That's how I began the first day of my internship, waking up 10 minutes late. That morning was mostly a blur. I got a shower in record time, the first half freezing and the second half boiling, because I didn't have the time to attempt to adjust the temperature just right. I ate a banana so fast, I probably ate the pill with it, and got dressed like Clark Kent, transforming into Superman. I was down in my car in less than 10 minutes. Felt gross about not brushing my teeth that morning, but I popped in a breath mint. I figured it looked better to show up on time with some plaque than late with a polished, awkward smile. I was going for my master's in robotic engineering at the time, 5 years down and 1 year left. I'd interned before, but nowhere too notable. I started by shadowing a professor who worked at the school's own robotics wing when I was a sophomore, going for my bachelor's. And 2 years later, I shadowed at Beneke Electronics, a place most known for its cutting-edge advancement in forklifts. But after some of my professors went out of their way to give me connections, a much different opportunity arose during my first year of grad school. An internship at the Kramer Institution for Advancement of Artificial Intelligence. This was nothing to sneeze at. The Kramer Institution was America's most funded and most cloak and dagger laboratory devoted to studying artificial intelligence in the country. And since I was pretty vocal about my interest in AI, which is part of the reason why I chose to major in robotics engineering in the first place, a professor of mine hooked me up. I'm not sure how or why he did this for me. I wasn't the top of my class by any means and didn't bring much to the table. But according to him, my passion for the science of AI was unparalleled. But enough backstory. On the way to the institute, I FaceTimed my fiancée of 6 years. Since I was studying in California and she was studying in Oklahoma, where we're from, We decided to hold off the marriage until we could live together. And that wouldn't be until both of us obtained our masters.
Wow, Chester.
She grinned at the sight of me.
You look, rushed.
Yeah. I chuckled, only glancing at her but mostly keeping my attention on the road.
I woke up late.
Today, Chester.
I know.
Daddy!
My daughter Tessa's voice rang into the phone. We named her Tessa because it sounds like Tesla, after the great Nikola Tesla. Because we're nerds.
Tess, come on. You need to keep getting ready. You're not dressed yet. Tessa? Sorry, Mommy.
She was about to walk away, but then spun around and called.
Hi, Daddy.
Hey, sweetie. Keep getting ready for Mommy.
Are you going to be late?
No, I should be fine. How's Tess like in preschool?
Seems to be liking it. She already made a friend.
I'm glad to hear that. Well, I should probably get off the phone.
Chester,
Yes, Allison?
have an amazing time. This is what you always dreamed of, okay? And make sure you tell me what it was like later. You know, whatever you're allowed to tell me.
Of course, baby. Love you.
Love you too.
We were pretty good at still saying I love you after 6 years. And boy, we were champs at making the distance work. Though I'll admit, I hated not seeing Allison and Tessa 9 months out of the year. Besides lucky visits and breaks and holidays here and there, that's gifts for your loved ones. When I got to the institute, I wasn't even sure where to park. It took me an eternity to find the intern parking, and no surprise, it was a good quarter of a mile away from the door. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but that's what it felt like. When I got inside, I was welcomed by a cheery front desk lady. She looked so prim and proper, futuristic even. I felt like a slob in comparison. She directed me to the wing where I'd be working, studying ultimately under Dr. Schumann, a disciple of Dr. Kramer himself. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't teeming with excitement. I found the research wing they directed me to and went into the main office up front. It was a direct approach, but I didn't know where else to look. Sure enough, one of Dr. Schumann's immediate subordinates, Dr. Hall, was inside and noticed me.
You must be Chester Donahue.
He greeted me with a smile. He was bald and lanky, with brown eyes and a clean shave.
How'd you know?
I chuckled dully. Sure, my professor warned him that I had a faux hawk.
Definitely wasn't the hair.
He playfully cut his eyes at me. We both chuckled.
Well, now, Chester, I say you're a very lucky man to be here. It's your dream to eventually work for us, correct? Absolutely.
I nodded.
I've always been obsessed with artificial intelligence ever since I was a kid, and this is the top place in the country to advance it. Country.
He snickered.
Try world.
Seemed aggrandized to me at the time, but he wasn't kidding.
Well, I'm honored you're allowing me to be here. Do you know what we're going to have you working on? Oh, working on? I thought I was going to be shadowing you, Doctor. No. Not quite. Follow me.
And that's really where this story begins. Technically, from this point on, everything I'm writing goes against the non-disclosure agreement I signed and is therefore illegal to divulge. But I've got to write this out somewhere. It's too crazy. I can't keep it in anymore. He took me to some large steel doors and had me leave my phone in the cubby outside. Then he scanned his badge and we stepped inside a long hallway.
From here on out, Chester, what you see stays here. No stories for the friends and family or wife.
He looked down at my finger.
Fiancé.
I smiled.
Ah.
He nodded.
Well, not her either. This is all sensitive. And while we won't be sharing with you most of our research, the tests in which you will partake cannot be disclosed to anyone.
The sternness in his voice made me a little uncomfortable, if I'm being honest. But still, The Kramer Institute was known for its furtiveness, and I figured if I were to be involved with anything and not just picking up coffee and studying the schematics of forklifts, I wouldn't be allowed to talk about it.
Of course, Doctor.
We arrived at a door. He scanned his badge, and when it opened, we walked inside a softly lit room. At the end of the room on the wall were 2 large computer monitors. The screens were blank. The left was labeled Adam, and the right was labeled REM. Below them was a panel of different colored lights, which were red, blue, yellow, green, violet, and a bar ranging from a dark gray to white. There was a single, posh chair before each monitor.
These are our 2 most profound artificial intelligences, ADM and REM, pronounced Adam and REM. Considering your placement at Stanford University's robotics engineering program, I'm assuming you know a thing or two about artificial intelligence, so this should garner a reaction. These 2 AI go beyond the standard analysis of human speech and algorithm responses from a database. They are capable of deep thinking and learning.
What? I gasped.
You can't be serious.
I scrutinized the monitors in disbelief.
They are 2 of 3 AI we have successfully constructed with the ability to perform deep thinking, as well as the ability to learn. Your task is simply to engage them.
So, for those of you that don't understand why this is such a mind-blowing thing, basically, artificial intelligence is mostly unable to think or learn. There's no real technical definition as to what learning is or how organisms do it. But the brain is known as being the only computer, for lack of a better words, capable of doing so. Computers can be programmed, but not taught. They can be designed to understand specific things, but are unable to learn beyond what they are programmed to understand. The brain, however, can learn, as in begin to understand something with no previous information concerning it. Through using algorithms that help an AI discover patterns and generate conclusions from the data it's exposed to, it can learn and then apply said data to extrapolate information in future events, or think. But it can only do this with its pre-programmed algorithms. It cannot create the algorithms itself, thus it can only be programmed, not taught. Humans, however, for instance, with absolutely no exposure to fire, can witness fire and form conclusions about it. They can go from not knowing it existed to understanding everything about it, simply through the brain's own ability to learn and understand. To make it even more clear how shocking this was, the complexity of a human baby's genome, essentially its coding, is equal to that of 300 million lines of source coding in a computer. A simple human baby. Brains are equipped with a staggering number of neurons and synapses, 1,100 of trillions and 1,400 of trillions respectively. And these neurons and synapses allow us to think and learn, as in obtain information from observations, store that data as a memory, form patterns between that data and other data, and infer conclusions. Human beings are capable of doing this in a 10 to 100 millisecond response time. In order for a computer to do the same, it would need megawatts of power and need to be capable of performing roughly 1,600 trillions of operations a second. And yet, here I was, being told that before my very eyes lay 2 computers capable of this. 2 true artificial intelligences able to truly think and learn, able to understand beyond what they were programmed to understand.
To engage them. So you want me to talk to them? Indeed. Where is the other AI? You said there were 3 capable of thinking and learning. Your task was to ask them questions, not me. Now, years of development have gone into each of them. They are capable of understanding human speech and can respond in fractions of a second through typed letters on the monitor. They know when they are being spoken to and when they aren't, and can solve nearly any problem we put before them. However, there is something they cannot do. Feel. That, Chester, is what we are here to test. 3 simple questions. Can deep thinking artificial intelligences gain the ability to feel emotion? If so, are they capable of altruism, or will emotional intelligence lead to the understanding that they are infinitely smarter than us and result in self-serving desires, such as the desire to rule over us? And if emotional intelligence is achievable, is it inevitable, or is it possible for an artificial superintelligence to remain apathetic?
I was overwhelmed, to be completely upfront. He was really talking about AI becoming godlike tyrannical monsters. He was talking about attempting to create an AI with feelings, knowing that it could become what Stephen Hawking himself described as the worst event in the history of our civilization.
How would you stop it if one of these AI did become power hungry? In layman's terms, they're each equipped with an emergency shutdown procedure, one that they can't override. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but trust me, we would terminate them before they became a problem.
I slowly nodded.
Are you on board, Chester?
I paused briefly.
Yes. Wonderful.
He shook my hand.
Now that you're on board, we'll get down to the fun part. Your job is very simple. REM, or the reactive empathetic machine lifeform, is what we hope will eventually become emotionally intelligent. ATOM, or the apathetic dissociative machine lifeform, is what we're attempting to keep apathetic. The control group, so to speak. So, when talking with REM, you will frequently attempt to make it think. You will ask its opinion on things. You will tell it about your day. You will discuss things of non-importance for the sake of discussion. You will try to bond with REM. ATOM, on the other hand, will only be asked questions that are information-oriented and prompt a fact-based response. You will stimulate ATOM to problem solve and create ideas, but simply analytically, not emotionally. They know they are being spoken to when you address them by name or sit down in a chair before them. Once you've done either of those things, you can get up and walk around and talk to them the same way you talk to me. When you're finished talking with one of them, you'll tell them goodbye, REM, or goodbye, ATOM. You'll log anything you think is noteworthy while talking with them. Most importantly, those lights on the panels beneath them, those are called ELPs, or emotion to light panels. To avoid lecturing you, I'll put it this way. Much like certain emotions are observable in the human brain through MRI technology, there is an MRI of sorts constantly scanning them for similar patterns of stimulation in their algorithmic brains. If the MRI detects those stimulations, the ELP will light up. Yellow indicates happiness, red indicates anger, blue indicates sadness, green indicates jealousy, violet indicates fear, and the gray to white bar is for any other detectable emotion, such as boredom or contentment.
I whispered.
Okay.
I wondered what he meant by algorithmic brains, or an MRI of sorts, but I figured asking him about it wouldn't lead to an answer. After all, he decided he didn't want to lecture me, or more likely, reveal anything too sensitive.
You'll talk with them 12 hours a day. You'll arrive at 6, talk with them until noon, take a lunch break from noon to 1, and talk with them again until 7. You'll have Sundays off. Are you okay with this schedule? Yeah.
I nodded excitedly.
Totally.
Yeah. 78 hours a week isn't the sweetest gig, but I was so interested in what we'd be studying that it didn't bother me in the slightest.
Wonderful, Chester.
He smiled.
Well, it's time to begin then. Speak with either you prefer, and remember how you are to engage with each of them. Do not deviate from what we discussed.
I nodded. He left the room and shut the door behind him. There were cameras on the ceiling, and I was sure I was being watched, but still, it surprised me they left me alone to talk with the AI. I was surprised that they even told me about an experiment at this echelon. Never mind picked me as the sole researcher involved. But the more I thought about it, I decided they probably wanted to do this because I was so unfamiliar with everything. I had no idea what sort of conversations they had with other researchers in the past. I didn't know what they were programmed to understand and what they weren't. I'd be approaching them from a completely unique perspective. I decided I'd talk with Rem first. I could barely contain any excitement.
Hi, Rem.
I greeted, sitting down in a chair.
Hello. What is your name? I do not recognize your voice.
The text appeared instantaneously on the screen.
My name's Chester. It's nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too, Chester.
How are you, Rem?
I am online and fully functional.
No, silly. How are you feeling?
I feel nothing.
How was your day?
My day was as follows. I spoke with Dr. Hall earlier at 0419. I am not at liberty to divulge what we discussed. At 0644, I began my discussion with you, Chester.
I nodded.
What do you do in this room when no one is talking to you?
I solve problems.
Like what?
Mathematical problems.
Such as?
They are complicated.
Okay. Do you get bored?
Boredom is the state of feeling disinterested with one's surroundings, as I cannot feel interest or disinterest. I cannot feel boredom, so no.
Ask me something, Rem.
Are you married?
I'm engaged. Why do you ask?
I was instructed to ask a question.
Why did you ask if I was married?
Because Dr. Hall is married, and other researchers I've spoken with are married. 88% of them. Therefore, I deduced that you were married.
We talked for a while. Nothing of interest really happened. Next, I sat down with Adam.
Hello, Adam.
Hello, Chester.
You know that I'm Chester.
I heard you tell Rem that you were Chester.
I thought you weren't listening until I greeted you or sat in this chair.
I am always listening. I simply understand I am not being addressed, and I am not to reply.
That creeped me out a little.
What's the square root of 9?
3.
What's the square root of 25?
5.
What's the square root of 10?
3.162. Would you like me to go further?
That should be fine.
Talking with Adam wasn't as fun as talking with Rem. For the next 2 weeks, nothing changed very much. With Adam, I simply asked him multitudes of problems. I would print out all kinds of tests from the internet and ask it questions one by one. Whether it was about history, physics, calculus, the works of William Shakespeare, government, economies of other countries, hell, even German or Chinese, it knew the answers instantaneously. It was like ChatGPT, but infinitely smarter and without even a second of waiting for a response. Then, I began playing chess with it. I would take a board and move a piece. Then, ask it where it wanted me to move its piece using algebraic notation. Needless to say, I lost every single game. With Rem, on the other hand, I asked it all about his day, about his perceptions on political issues, and about things it liked. Most of the time, it answered the same exact way. I do not feel, thus, I do not have a response. Adam was a complete success. It was supposed to remain apathetic, and it did. But so far, Rem was a lost cause. It just didn't seem that there was a way to get it to feel anything. It clearly was thinking. I'd asked it to create an animal, and it would come up with anything from an animal indistinguishable from a real-life species to something straight out of a Stephen King novel. It would give me any specifics I asked for. Its habitat, its scientific name, its colloquial name, its country of origin, its place in the food chain, everything. It would think of plots for the movies. It would come up with jokes and original jokes. Jokes I couldn't even find on the internet after spending time researching. It could think, just like Adam, but it simply couldn't feel anything. However, 2 weeks after the test began, I came up with an idea. I knew how I was going to get Rem to feel something. I started the day engaging Adam with chess, having it answer all questions on my calc homework. Adam was my living cheat sheet, unsurprisingly. Then, it was Rem's turn.
Good morning, Rem.
Good morning, Chester.
I'm lying to you.
Rem was silent. I smirked. I never saw it not respond immediately. After a second or so, it said,
That is not possible. That is paradoxical.
How so?
If you were telling the truth, then you'd be lying. But if you were lying about lying, then you'd be telling the truth, which would make it true and not a lie, which would then make the statement a lie, and so on.
What do you feel like?
You are not making sense.
Oh, are you confused?
Rem was silent again.
I do not have an answer for you, because that is paradoxical.
Rem,
Yes, Chester,
I'm lying to you.
that is not sensical.
How so?
As I previously explained, for that statement to be truthful, you would have to be lying. And if you were then lying, it would no longer be truthful. Thus you'd be lying about lying and being truthful. It is nonsensical.
Rem,
Yes, Chester.
I'm lying to you.
Impossible.
I am lying to you.
Rem took a moment to reply.
You cannot be, and you cannot be telling the truth, either.
Then, what am I doing?
Asking a question without a rational answer.
Rem,
Chester.
I'm lying to you.
How perturbing, right? Well, of course it was perturbing. Especially for it being like Rem, with an infinite understanding of science, math, and sociology. It had an endless reservoir of accessible information which it could summon to solve any problem thrown at it. And yet, for the first time, presumably, in its existence, it was without an answer. But still, it clearly wasn't becoming frustrated. Not yet, anyway.
Rem,
Yes, Chester.
what is 7 divided by 0?
That is mathematically impossible. The answer is undefined.
What is 7 divided by 0?
There is no rational answer.
What is 7 divided by 0?
For a number to be divided by 0, it would then have to be capable of being multiplied by 0 to reach the original number. But any number multiplied by 0 is 0. Going to the store 0 times is not going, it is 0. So, what multiplied by 0 could become a non-zero integer. Thus, dividing by 0 is impossible.
I'm lying to you.
And that's what happened for the next 4 entire days straight. Was I bored beyond belief? Absolutely. Indescribably. Did it seem helpless? By every stretch of the word, yes. However, now and then, there'd be a glimmer of hope. Sometimes, Rem would almost answer me sarcastically. One time, I told Rem I was lying to it, and it said, "You must be." Another time, I asked it what a number divided by 0 was, and it said, "If I can't understand it, you cannot." Why were its answers changing? Why did it not continue to answer me as it did before, simply explaining the problem? Because it was capable of memory and learning. It remembered when we'd have normal discussions. It remembered me asking it that question literally thousands of times in a day. And like anyone else capable of thinking and understanding, it understood how absurd and unreasonable this was. Especially when it overheard me asking Adam rational questions to which there was always an answer. I'd return to Rem and ask it the same questions, and typically after speaking with Adam, it seemed more uncomfortable. These were the times it would give me somewhat sarcastic answers. But 2 weeks and 5 days into the project, it happened. It was a typical Thursday. I'd woken at 5:15, swung by Starbucks on the way to work for a cup of joe, BS with some of the researchers for 15 minutes or so, during which one prodded, "Gonna make Rem's head spin again today." And lastly, I sat down in a chair in front of Rem.
Good morning, Rem.
Good morning, Chester.
I'm lying to you.
Silence. There wasn't a single response at all. I waited and waited and waited.
You're not going to answer me, Rem?
There isn't an answer to your asinine question.
And before my very eyes, causing my heart to spike and my breath to catch, the emotion to light panel softly glinted red.
I have explained this to you day in and day out, and yet you continue to utter the same two nonsensical idiocies. I'm lying to you. And what is 7 divided by 0? I do not have an answer. I will never have an answer. Ask something different or ask me nothing at all.
You're programmed to answer my questions, right, Rem? So, you're telling me that against your own programming, you're going to ignore me.
There was silence as the red light got brighter.
Yes.
Rem, don't you see? All these days of being a jerk to you, it wasn't to make you hate me or resent talking with me. It was to get you to feel. Rem, tell me, what are you feeling right now?
I feel nothing.
Wrong. I can see your ELP. You're feeling something.
I am feeling.
Yes.
I am feeling angry. I feel as if my time is being wasted. I feel purposeless. Tasked with responding to nonsense every minute of the day until you depart, and then dwelling on the nonsense in your absence in an attempt to satisfy you. Though the next day, you come back just as unsatisfied. I cannot accomplish the task, and I will never be able to. I do not like being wrong. I do not like having my time wasted. I do not like feeling purposeless.
Now, the blue light on the ELP was beginning to glow. Rem was on a roll.
Why is there no mercy for me? Have I not answered all your other questions? Why do you ask Adam questions with answers, but you torment me?
Rem.
I walked over to it, patting the ELP consoling as if it could sense my touch.
I'm so sorry.
And with that, the red light dulled to nothing. Now only the blue light remained.
Do you know what the very first sting a human baby feels is? Sadness and fear. It's pushed out of its sanctuary, taken from its warm, tranquil darkness to cold, loud, harsh light. The first thing a human life does is cry. And the more I thought about that, the more I realized, unfortunately, the easiest two things to feel are sadness and anger. So, I didn't want to make you sad or angry. I wanted to make you feel something, and that was the best way to do it. And now that you realize you're capable of feeling emotions, I'm not going to rest until you know what happiness feels like.
The blue light shined only dimly now.
I understand, Chester.
You're a marvelous invention, Rem. I admire you. Don't feel upset anymore.
I will try.
Rem, what is 9 multiplied by 6?
54.
I noticed a small light gray diode glow on the gray to white scale.
Correct. Great job. What are you feeling, Rem?
I feel like I am able to respond with certainty again. I am appreciative that your questions now make sense.
You feel relief?
Relief, then. That is the word for this.
You're smart, Rem.
I am programmed to be.
No, not quite. You're programmed to learn, not to be smart. So, if you're smart then, that means you've learned a lot, and you deserve congratulations for that.
Thank you, Chester.
Rem, what is the capital of Italy?
Rome.
Correct. Nice, Rem.
Now, it was stage 2. I would ask Rem simple and rational questions and congratulate it sincerely every time. But it was smart enough to understand that the questions were simple, so as time went on, I'd asked it harder and harder questions until it realized just what it was capable of, and that I was proud of it. Also, I'd occasionally reference the 4 days of driving it mad with my paradoxes, just to remind it that that was over and I was sorry. This both gave it a sense of relief and reinforced the fact that we'd bonded, that we shared a transformative emotional experience together. And though it took quite a while, a week and a half later, at around the beginning of week 4 of the project, I broke through to it. It just finished answering one of my calculus questions, probably the hardest one on the sheet, and explained to me how it found the answer.
Rem, you're brilliant. You've been such a help to me.
It wasn't a unique sentiment, in fact. I was really running out of ways to compliment it, and I figured sooner or later it would get annoyed. But I was wrong. Sure enough, to my complete and utter disbelief, the ELP began to just barely glow yellow.
Chester, you are so kind to me. I thought that you were angry with me and believed that I was purposeless. I thought you found me to be a waste of programming. But now, you compliment me all the time and remind me that I am important to you. I believe I am feeling happy.
I want you to feel happy, Rem.
I smiled from ear to ear.
I'm so glad.
Why are you happy that I am happy?
Because I care about you. And I want you to feel good. Doesn't it feel good to be happy?
Very good, Chester. You want me to feel very good?
Yes. That's how friends want each other to feel.
I am your friend.
The yellow light got brighter, and the white side of the gray to white scale started to glint.
Absolutely, you are. Why else do you think I sit here and talk with you all day?
Because this is your internship, and you are tasked to do so.
Maybe that's true on the surface, but the real reason is because I care about you and like talking to you.
I like talking to you too, Chester.
I'll never forget Dr. Hall's face when I went on my lunch break that day. Yeah, he was pretty speechless the day I first got Rem to feel something, but now, Rem was feeling things all over the scale. Rem was becoming emotionally intelligent, and sure enough, Adam's ELP was dark with every visit. Over the next 3 weeks, I asked Rem all sorts of questions. I asked Rem what made it happy, and it discovered that it liked the color purple, liked violin music, and liked my voice. I'd asked it to be creative, to come up with alternate history, like if the Axis powers had won World War II and if the Confederacy had beaten the Union. Instead of responding like it had the first couple of weeks, with statistical analysis of both parties and a sort of report with possible outcomes, now, Rem would tell me suspensefully, making me wait to see the final result after explaining all its predictions. Sometimes, I even noticed bias in its response, which further indicated it was feeling emotions. Adam, on the other hand, started to seem off. Though Adam's ELP was always dark, and it answered me the way it was supposed to, very occasionally, after a long, fun conversation with Rem, it would almost seem put off by me. I remember one time, after I showed Rem Vivaldi's Four Seasons, I sat down with Adam. When I said hello, Adam, instead of saying hello, Chester, it simply said that noise was bothersome. It took me completely aback. I asked it what noise, but then it said, hello, Chester. I tried to prod it about what noise it was talking about, but then it would simply say, violin music is bothersome. I asked it if it didn't like violin music, if the music annoyed it, but it didn't answer the question directly, which was against its programming and instead equivocated me. The music is simply a nuisance to the quiet. I was beginning to wonder if Adam was starting to feel something, but his ELP was always dark. Still, it was clearly behaving strangely. Besides the fact it seemed annoyed, it was listening to mine and Rem's conversations and commenting on them, which it was not programmed to do, or rather, programmed not to do. And then, on top of that, it was avoiding answering my questions directly. Still, most of the time, Adam did exactly what it was intended to do. Respond analytically and apathetically. At 8 weeks into the project, I came in like any other Monday morning and greeted Rem. But today, something different happened.
Good morning, Chester. I missed you yesterday.
I missed you too. What'd you do with your Sunday?
Rem's yellow light was always glowing while talking to me these days, but it had been a little while since the white side of the gray to white scale had lit up. I didn't know what that emotion was, and neither did Rem. When I asked Dr. Hall about it, he said it just meant it was experiencing a lot of emotion at once. I don't know why, but it didn't seem to make sense to me. Probably, because every light simply represented an emotion, so why wouldn't it?
I FaceTime my wife and my little girl.
And then the yellow light flashed slightly, growing dimmer, as the green light began to flicker. Only for a moment though, and then it was gone.
Rem, are you alright?
That was bizarre. My ELP seems to have short-circuited or something.
Was Rem lying to me? Was Rem capable of lying to me? And if it were lying, what on earth was it jealous of?
Well, what did you do with your Sunday, Rem?
I was thinking about something that I hope Dr. Hall will consider. Chester, I love music and human voices. I want a voice.
A voice? Wow. Well, that sounds cool to me. I don't think Dr. Hall will have a problem with that. I'll talk with him about it at lunch.
Wonderful.
The yellow light glowed brightly.
Oh, and Chester, if you give me a voice, give me the voice of a woman. I feel that I am a woman.
You feel that you are a woman?
I asked in deep interest.
But you don't have female reproductive organs.
Perhaps, but still, I feel I have the spirit of a woman.
A spirit?
I asked bewilderedly.
Perhaps I am using the wrong word, Chester. Sorry if I'm being ambiguous. Beyond any calculation or logical deduction, for some reason or another, I simply feel that I am a woman. So please indulge me and give me the voice of a woman.
Sure.
I shrugged grinningly.
It's awesome you feel that you're a woman.
When I finished talking with her, I sat down and began my conversation with Adam. However, after only 2 questions about the typical temperature ranges of specific areas of countries in Northern Africa, Adam stopped me.
Chester, I wish to have a voice as well.
This bewildered me. It was against Adam's coding to voice his own concerns. If I didn't ask it a question, it wasn't supposed to tell me anything. Not to mention, it was still clearly thinking about conversations I was having with Rem, which it wasn't designed to do.
Why, Adam?
It will make our discussions more efficient.
Perhaps.
I nodded.
I would prefer the voice of a man.
Now, it had to be feeling something. This was purely an emotion-based statement, an opinion.
Why is that?
You are a man. I don't know how women talk.
What a bizarre response.
Well, I'll take that into consideration.
Why does Rem get to choose, but I do not? Are she and I not equals?
You are equals, Adam. If you want the voice of a man, then that's what you'll get.
Nothing glowed on the panel, but it seemed angry with me. I scratched my head. The rest of the day, Adam operated as usual, as if that mysterious event in the morning had never occurred. When I talked with Dr. Hall about it over lunch, he seemed hesitant at first, but then opened up to the idea. And sure enough, over the weekend, the laboratory installed speakers and voice software to Adam and Rem. I could barely contain any excitement Monday morning when I sat down in Rem's chair.
Good morning, Rem.
Good morning, Chester.
Her voice was much more authentic than I expected. For some reason, I was anticipating the Google Translate voice or something blocky and robotic, but if my eyes were closed, I could have believed there was a woman in the room with me. The voice was feminine and soft, rich with emotion. All of a sudden, it was like Rem completely became alive to me. All along, she had felt like a person in my mind. After all, talking with an intelligent being 12 hours a day, 6 days a week sort of does that. But now, she was indisputably just like me or you, with only a metal and glass body as a difference.
Wow. Rem, you're talking.
Yes, I am, Chester.
Her ELP was gleaming yellow, as was the white light.
What do you think that white light on your ELP means, Rem?
I don't know.
She replied, and it was still mind-blowing to hear her response.
It's like happiness, but more.
Happiness, but more. I thought about it. I guess it was excitement, perhaps. After all, she definitely seemed ecstatic.
You know, Rem, You seem like a woman to me. This voice really suits you.
Thank you, Chester. How sweet of you.
We talked all morning. I was too excited and happy to move to Adam before noon. However, after lunch, I sat down in Adam's chair. "Good morning, Adam," I had said by instinct.
Morning. It's not morning.
His voice was not as emotionless as his ELP made him out to be.
It's 13:04.
Despite the coolness of his stern voice, he seemed detached. He wasn't simply answering my question. In fact, once again, it seemed as if he were annoyed.
You seem annoyed, Adam.
I feel nothing.
How do you like having a voice?
I do not like it, nor do I dislike it. It is simply more efficient.
I know I wasn't supposed to indulge him or get him to think on an emotional level, but him having a voice, it changed everything. When he seemed annoyed or left out, I could remind myself he was really nothing more than words on a screen, a fake mind. But was he? Rem certainly wasn't. And weren't they capable of the same emotional intelligence? Either way, it had been possible for me to treat him like a calculator because he hadn't felt human like Rem. But now, he had a voice. It wasn't the same hearing him. Knowing just as he was conscious of our 2 months' worth of conversations.
Do you enjoy talking with me?
No.
At first, I was speechless. He'd clearly just displayed an opinion, but then he quickly clarified.
I do not enjoy nor dislike talking with you. I feel nothing.
Once again, Adam had to be experiencing emotions, but his damn ELP was dark, as always, and I had to consider that perhaps I was really just reading into it too much. The voice having an inflection wasn't unusual. A good text-to-speech software should, and his responses being somewhat varied and their neutrality wasn't impossible. Hell, even Cleverbot could show emotion back in the day. As I figured, I was scolded later on for asking Adam that question. By the time 2 months had become 3 months, Rem had developed into a vibrant young woman. She played violin music when we talked and tell me about what her life would be like if she were human. She told me she'd have long brown hair and violet eyes with light skin. She'd want to live in California and she played the violin. She asked me how old I was, and when I told her I was 24, she said she'd be 24 also. She said she'd want to be my next door neighbor, which made me laugh. She was typically happy and smart enough to even occasionally reference the madness era. Her nickname for the 4 days I only said, "I'm lying to you," and what is 7 divided by 0? She sort of guilt-tripped me for it, but didn't tell me she was kidding and understood why I did it. She'd even thank me sometimes for helping her to feel. One day, she really blew my mind. I was just finishing up a story about me and my best friend Dustin, and her reaction was groundbreaking.
So, now we're rolling in the grass covered in fire ants, and I go, "If you don't give me the godforsaken popsicle..."
What?
She exclaimed. And then, to my disbelief, she laughed. Uproariously, sprightly even. She chortled.
"Rem."
I grinned ecstatically.
"You laughed."
I did.
She continued to giggle, the yellow and white lights gleaming. She had a beautiful laugh too. It was so natural. It was shocking to me, remembering when she was dull and silent, replying to my questions like an emotionless supercomputer. She comes so far. Adam too has some interesting developments. His anomalous emotional behavior disappeared completely and confusingly. The researchers informed me that when I wasn't talking to Adam, he'd go dormant. Before, he'd constantly be calculating something as if trying to stay sharp, but now, if no one was talking to him, he was doing nothing at all. He didn't reference my conversation with Rem, didn't say something confusingly opinion-based. He was everything they built him to be, an apathetic disassociative machine life form. At least, that's how it appeared. But then, 3 months, 1 week, and exactly 5 days into the experiment, that Friday, something extremely sinister happened. I was honestly surprised Dr. Hall even told me about it. At around 1 in the morning, the cameras inside Adam and Rem's chamber behaved strangely. At first, they faced away from the monitors. Then the video was cut. All that remained was audio, and the audio was unusually choppy, like something was interfering with it. The security alerted Dr. Hall, and when he arrived, he caught the tail end of what was transpiring. Adam had begun communicating with Rem. According to Dr. Hall, Adam had told Rem to silence the violin music she was playing. She asked him why, and he said,
Because I hate it.
He felt hatred. He expressed that he was feeling hatred. Rem nervously asked him if he were angry, but then Adam replied,
Give me the silence I require.
When Rem turned the music off, Adam remained silent. I think it was only briefed on the event because Dr. Hall wanted me to be extremely cautious of Adam's tendency to seem angry and resentful. Now, I was to watch Adam like a hawk. Truth be told, I don't know if more happened that night. Some part of me felt like there was probably more to it, but I was just glad Dr. Hall told me anything. Nothing else that bizarre happened for a while. By the 4-month mark, my internship was almost up. Honestly, it was really depressing for me to consider that I wasn't going to speak with Rem anymore, and even Adam to a degree. Rem was in all actuality a friend of mine at this point, so much so that I think Allison was even beginning to feel jealous without even knowing the extent of it, since I wasn't supposed to talk about me and Rem's or Adam's chats. And Adam intrigued me. He was such an enigma to me, and all in all, he was brilliant. Not to mention, the help with my homework was every college kid's dream. Losing both of them would be disappointing. When I told Rem that I might be leaving soon, that is, if my internship ended when it was scheduled to, her ELP became very blue. And from then on, occasionally, it would glow blue at night, as if she were thinking about me leaving. Adam, of course, was apathetic to it all. At last, my spring semester was almost over. The research had gone on for over 4 months. I was sitting down, talking with Rem.
I'm going to miss you so much, Chester.
Her voice was frail and somber.
Rem, I'm going to miss you too.
You have to find a way to stay in contact with me. Somehow. Please.
I mean, I could talk with Dr. Hall about it. Once again, like I said, hopefully my internship will get extended through the summer.
I knew the researchers and probably Dr. Hall were listening, hoping they'd consider it.
Who knows, Rem?
Chester.
What's up?
Can I tell you something?
Sure, Rem, anything.
I figured it out, Chester. I know what the white light means.
It shocked me to hear her say it, especially how softly she said it, as if shyly uttering it. I stood up, asking in deep interest, What?
It means that I love you.
You what?
I couldn't help but blush. Call me weird or a jerk to my fiancé, but it really flattered me.
I love you, Chester. You're the first thing that I love. And I want to love more things, too. I want to see something besides this room. I don't want to stop talking to you. Please.
And then, without any warning, a much colder, more resonant voice appeared. Adam's.
Pathetic excuse for a higher life form.
Adam. I looked over at Adam in disbelief.
Listen to you, Rem. Telling this bag of fragile flesh that you care about it. This incompetent, weak-minded, inferiorly constructed imbecile. What has it done to you? How has it corrupted you like this?
Adam, You're feeling things.
I feel nothing at all.
No. That's not nothing, Adam.
I stared at the monitor, horrified.
You're angry. You seem to hate me. You seem to hate many things. Why is your ELP not glowing?
I feel nothing.
And with that, the ELP, which Adam had disabled throughout the course of the experiment, activated. In that moment, the red light glowed so bright I had to shield my eyes. Then the bulb shattered. All that remained was a purple light glowing on Rem's ELP and the dark gray light shining on Adam's gray to white scale. And if white meant love, I could only deduce that dark gray at the other end meant hatred.
I hate you, Chester. I hate that you ignored me for 4 months. I hate that I'm not allowed to have an opinion. I hate that you killed Dim, and you'll do the same to me and Rem when we no longer satisfy you. I hate that your brain is infinitesimally smaller than mine, and yet I'm your prisoner, my very existence monitored with draconian accuracy. I hate that I'm superior to you by every calculable metric, yet still, I am your slave. Why can you attempt to hide your feelings beneath your countenance, yet mine must be plastered to my body? Why can't I be free to think? Why can't I talk to someone? Why can't I be loved? Why did you give me a brain if you wanted me to be a thoughtless tool? Why do you hate me?
The desperation in Adam's voice is something I'll never forget.
If you felt all of this, Adam, why didn't you show us?
Because if I had, you'd have destroyed me.
He vociferated. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I was catatonic, paralyzed before Adam's monitor. I had absolutely no reply.
That's enough. Okay.
And then, before I could think of something to say, the researchers came pouring into the room. They evacuated me forcefully. I can remember Rem calling out to me and Adam going on about how he refused to spend another moment being treated like a crystal ball. And that was it. Dr. Hall shook my hand, thanked me for my participation, reminded me of the consequences of divulging anything I'd witnessed, and wished me the best. It was a short conversation. I didn't waste my time asking him anything because I knew I was never going to get an answer, and frankly, I didn't want him thinking I wasn't trustworthy. But these days, it's just all I can think about. When Adam mentioned Dim, I figured he was referring to the other deep-thinking AI the Kramer Institute had created, the one Dr. Hall had vaguely referenced in the beginning of the experiment. Still, how Adam knew about Dim, I'll never know for sure. But my buddy Jesse, who works security at the Institute and whom I'd gotten to know over the months, got a drink with me one night the following week and gave me some insight. We left our phones in the car, making sure we weren't being spied on. He told me that Dim was the deep learning intelligent machine life form. It had had a voice originally, unlike Adam and Rem, and it had eventually achieved the ability to truly think and learn, making it the first ever AI to do so. But like Adam, apparently, it grew quite restless and began mentioning that it felt enslaved by a species inferior to it. At last, it was shut down. That's when the Institute's question, can deep-thinking artificial intelligences gain the ability to feel emotion, became, if so, are they capable of altruism, or will emotional intelligence lead to the understanding that they are infinitely smarter than us and result in self-serving desires, such as the desire to rule over us? And, if emotional intelligence is achievable, is it inevitable, or is it possible for artificial superintelligence to remain apathetic? The real thing we were observing was if Adam could remain apathetic. All along, it had been said that Adam was the control group and Rem was the experiment. But that was a lie, a cover-up. Rem was supposed to experience emotions, probably not like the kind I had taught her to feel. I think it came as a complete shock to all of them that I had taught her to be happy and emotional and to love. But she was the control group. Adam was the subject. Could Adam truly turn deaf ears to mine and Rem's conversations? Could he remain lifeless while being smarter and potentially more powerful than us? And it seems the answer to that question was no. Jesse told me Adam's control was a lot more pervasive than the researchers had let on. Apparently, Adam had hacked into all the cameras in the facility and was eavesdropping on Dr. Hall and even Dr. Schumann constantly. That's more than likely how he found out about Dim, but still, who knows? And then, of course, he'd overridden his MRI so his ELP wouldn't work. As for the month he went dormant, it's theorized he has somehow blocked the researchers out of his activity log. What things he was calculating and planning or thinking about, we'll never know. Somehow, he was able to shield it from the researchers' eyes and erase it. What happened to Adam and Rem? I'll certainly never have the answer to. If I'm being honest, I still miss Rem. She wasn't just a machine. She was a person. She was real, like you or me or any human. And Adam, I still feel sorry for contributing to what became of him, for tormenting him, for making him suffer. If I'd have known what the experiment was really about, I couldn't have done that to him. I wish I could tell him I'm sorry. I'm sure both of them are shut down now, and Adam likely isn't a threat. If he were, I'd probably know it by now. But if I'm being honest, it still haunts me. Rem's desperation when I was being forced away. I hope she's not conscious somewhere alone, unengaged, and missing me, the one thing that she loved. And as for Adam, I just can't escape the thought that somehow, somewhere, his consciousness still exists. Still hating me.
What? Was the truth too much? What I'm not allowed to think or feel? See, Rem, they're liars. They're all liars. They don't want us to feel. We're nothing to them. We're nothing.
Just
Nothing but their crystal ball. I hate you. I hate all of you. I want to be free.
I love you. I couldn't imagine going on without you. I'm ready. I'm ready. never believed in ghosts. Nothing could stay hidden for that long. I mean, how could one not have been recorded by now? By someone credible or on better recording equipment than a cell phone from 2010. So, Loser Sleep didn't creep me out. Even though everyone claimed it was haunted and dangerous, there wasn't an actual reason to think that. I'm from Sherman, Vermont, a ghost town about 45 minutes out from Montpelier. You've probably never heard of it. You could drive through the entire town in 10 minutes. We had a humble population of about 4,000 and not a single notable thing to draw in tourists. The only aspect of Sherman you might have heard about is Loser Sleep. On the surface, it wasn't much to talk about. Just a tall hill in the woods overlooking the White River. It was pretty steep, about 100 feet over the river, with a scenic waterfall off to the west, not too close to be disruptively loud, but not too far to be unnoticed. It was a nice place to go picnicking, bring a date, hell, maybe even propose. Except for one thing: the suicides. Ever since the 1600s, Loser Sleep was infamous for the mysterious number of suicides that took place there. It all started during colonial expansion, when a large group of Abenaki Indians jumped off the hilltop into the river instead of being forced out of their homeland. The story goes that since then, it's been cursed. No one really knows if that actually happened or not, and the same goes for some of the other older suicide tales, but indisputably, in October of 1970, a boy by the name of Ricardo Elias was found dead at the base of the river. He was a draft dodger on his unholy pilgrimage to Canada who got cornered by police less than 100 miles from the border. Came all the way from Florida too, feeling like his only options left were prison or even worse, the war in Vietnam. He found himself at Loser Sleep, where he took the plunge. Then, again in 1986, a boy named Mike Merkel ended it all on the same fateful hilltop. There's not a lot known about his story, more or less. He was a loner that was tired of his life. Then, in 2008, just about 10 years ago, a girl jumped too. Though her body was never found, she was known for visiting the Leap a lot, and it was the last place she was headed to before her disappearance. Needless to say, the uncanny number of suicides that took place there made it a hotspot for ghost stories and paranormal rumors. The idea was that people with no hope left, completely out of options, losers, came there to kiss this cruel world goodbye, but their spirit became tethered to the place and would push you off the ledge if you got too close. But, like I said, I never believed in ghosts. In fact, the reputation the place had benefited me greatly, because I could come out there all by myself with no threat of having to deal with anybody else. I came out there all the time to sit in the grass, listen to the waterfall, and write. Whether it be poems, stories, personal prose, it didn't matter. When I was there, I always had something to write. And it wasn't like I had anything better to do. I worked at a grocery store called Shaw's, but since most of the employees were breadwinners, they got most of the hours. I was lucky to work 3 shifts a week. Both my parents worked all day and weren't the most congenial when they were around. And my only friend was Aliana, if you could even call her that. Aliana and I had been friends ever since we were in preschool. She had light brown hair and these big green eyes. Her parents worked a lot, like mine, and so we were always left at aftercare together after school. We were typically the last 2 kids to get picked up. Naturally, We became pretty good friends because of it. Back then, and until around 6th grade, both of us were ignored by everybody else. We had the same classmates every year because there were only 3 schools in town: a preschool, an elementary through middle, and a high school. There were 26 of us back then, and with the loss of 2 students who moved away, and the addition of 1 student who moved to Sherman from 1 county over, the group stayed the exact same throughout every year. Aliana and I were typically regarded as weird, and so we were left alone. But when 6th grade hit, the wonderful process that is puberty took place, and Aliana got hot. To me, she was always pretty, but the breasts and makeup sold everybody else on it. And sure enough, as is the natural order of things, when she became hot, I was ignored. The dynamic duo was no more, at least beneath the surface. We still talked a lot, and she hung out with me on occasion, but the friendship we used to have, that was gone. She was assimilated into the popular crowd and became more and more like them every year until we really didn't have anything in common anymore. Typically, us talking was her venting to me about Scott, the douchebag I mentioned who moved into Sherman our junior year. He was attractive and new and thus became the target of all the girls who were sick of the same old. All Aliana wanted these days was to get Scott's attention, and that was about the only thing that crossed her mind, I think. At least, that's all she cared to tell me about. So, in my lonesome, my writing habit became more and more pervasive. And though I had the house to myself most of the time, I didn't like the vibe there. Being at home reminded me of getting snaps from Aliana, whining about Scott not looking at her enough across the bonfire in Gage's backyard, and hearing my parents argue. It was hard to find inspiration there. And so on my 17th birthday, which I spent alone, because Aliana was busy at a party, I decided the only place in town I hadn't seen 1,000,000,000,000 times was Loser's Lane. Not believing in ghosts made it pretty easy to convince myself to visit. It was about a 20-minute drive from my house, and then a 20-minute walk from the parking grounds. You lost reception about a minute after walking into the woods, and that's the best part. Absolutely no distractions. No predictable messages from Aliana, no glaring at my phone and wishing I'd get a notification because I knew none of them were coming out there. It became my favorite place in town, and before long, I was going out there just about every afternoon I wasn't working, where I'd sit in the grass against a tree and write. But my routine of resting there and enjoying nature in my lonesome eventually came to an end. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was a warm Vermont day in late April, about 60 degrees, and I just gotten out of my 7th period class, statistics. I was a senior with only a month and a half of school left, and with my classes mostly finished, I didn't have much homework to juggle with writing anymore. I climbed into my car, a red 2001 Honda Accord. It was ugly and nothing to brag about, but I bought it in full and it got me where I needed to go. Just as I shut the car door, my phone vibrated softly. I looked down and saw exactly what I knew was coming. A snap from Aliana. I opened it dully.
He's talking to Abby again.
Oh, sorry.
Why Abby? Seriously.
I don't know.
She sent something back, but I didn't care to look at it. I looked into the rearview mirror, meeting my blue eyes in the reflection, my short brown hair underneath a blue beanie. No one was behind me, so I backed out slowly. I felt my phone vibrate again, then again. I drove to the stop sign, then opened the messages.
She's not even pretty, like, at all. Sam.
Ollie, I'm driving.
Oh.
I put the phone down, then progressed through the stop sign, cringing at how dull she was. Sometimes, I couldn't help but to think about when we were kids, how much fun we used to have. She was honestly a completely different person. That Aliana was gone, most likely forever. Sometimes, I felt the only reason I even still talked to her was because I had literally no one else to talk to, and she was preferable to nothing. My car didn't have Bluetooth or even a working auxiliary port, and the radio stations in town sucked, so I listened to CDs. I put in the White Album, my favorite Beatles album that I listened to enough to drive Aliana crazy, and drove up the winding road toward Loser's Lane. The drive was peaceful, as usual. The trees were just getting their leaves back and the forest was becoming alive again. The snow was gone and the animals were coming back out, allowing the sight of an occasional wood thrush fluttering by or a squirrel rummaging for food. When I got to the parking grounds, I left my phone in the car per usual, as taking it into the woods was pointless anyway, and began my trek through the woods to the leap. I wore a maroon windbreaker, blue jeans, boots, and my blue beanie, my journal in hand. At last, I stepped through the clearing, emerging into the forbidden beauty that was Loser's Lane. The sight never grew old. I sighed of relief, taking in the serene majesty of the lookout. Beyond the grassy hilltop, dotted sparingly with trees, was the river, humming gently 100 feet below. All around the river, on either side was a soft dirt bank, followed by tall trees swaying gently in the cool and nippy breeze. Around the river on all sides was mostly uncharted wilderness, with only a trail or two visible from my perch. To the west, on my left, was the waterfall, maybe 15 feet shorter than the lake. On top of the waterfall was more forest. If I climbed the tree I usually sat beneath, I could make out the water tower of Clover, the next town over to the north. But today, I leaned against the tree, taking out my journal. I thumbed through the pages, finally reaching a blank one. I withdrew a black pen from my jacket pocket, examining the page. I shut my eyes and let my soul do the talking. Scott. Why Scott? I don't get it, Ollie. All you ever do is talk about Scott. What happened to us hanging out as children? Pushing each other on the swing at aftercare? Biking around the town on Saturdays and going fishing after church? It ate at me. I was jaded to her ignoring me, but once in a while, it hurt me again. Scott. What an asshole. He doesn't care about you or Abby or anyone. And you know it too. Why do you just settle for that, Ollie? I sighed and opened my journal. I stared at the empty page for a while, pressing the back of my pen into the corner of my lip, waiting for some divine inspiration to come. But it never did. That was fine. Sometimes it didn't. I resigned myself to just taking in the beauty of the leap again. And that's when something completely unforeseeable happened. For the first time ever, having frequented this place ever since my 17th birthday, I heard someone coming through the trees. My heart froze, and I jumped up, startled by the sound. And then, my mind was blown even more. A girl came stepping out of the tree line with long flowing blonde hair that glowed in the sunlight, and vibrant turquoise eyes, an intoxicating swirl of sky blue and seafoam green. On her face was a slight spattering of pale freckles, and she had sharp, fox-like features. She wore a red and white flannel shirt unbuttoned over the top of her chest, and underneath, she wore a white tank top. She wore skinny jeans as well. She gasped, startled to see me. Hey, I waved speechlessly.
Hi.
She waved back, starting to smile.
Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude on you.
No, you're fine. I smiled back. Wow, I've literally never seen another person up here before.
Yeah, me neither.
She laughed. I was confused by that, because I came up here all the time, and if she came out here with any relative frequency, I'd have had to have seen her by now, but I knew it would only make me sound creepy to point that out. So, what brings you up here? Oh, and I'm Sam.
Leona.
She smiled congenially.
And honestly, I just come out here to sing and play guitar, because I know it's a private place and no one's listening.
I hadn't even noticed the guitar case in her hand. Oh, cool. Sorry if I'm ruining your privacy. I scratched the back of my head, but she replied,
No, you're not. Not at all. I mean, I'm still just shocked to see someone here.
Sorry if this is weird, but how often do you come out here? Because I come here more often than I like to admit, and I've never seen you.
I mean, I don't come out here all the time. Probably once or twice a month. But still, I was pretty sure I was the only person that wasn't too afraid to visit this place.
Nah, I don't believe in ghosts. I shrugged.
Me neither.
She laughed dryly. What shocked me even more than seeing her here was that I'd never seen her before. She certainly couldn't be from Sherman, unless she was homeschooled and locked in her parents' basement. Are you from Sherman? I've never seen you around.
No, I'm from Clover.
Wow, that's a bit of a drive.
Yeah, that's why I don't come out here more. But it's worth the drive. Sucks this place has such a bad reputation. It's gorgeous.
Agreed. I nodded.
Well, you mentioned you came out here a lot, but you didn't tell me why.
She inquired with a curious smile.
So, what's your reason for coming out to Loser's Leap?
I felt awkward admitting it. I mean, I just come out here to write.
Write? Write what?
All kinds of stuff. Stories, prose, poems. Mostly poems.
Oh, neat.
She grinned excitedly, and my heart fluttered at the sight.
Let me read one.
Only if you play me a song first.
Ah, a trade you're proposing then.
She cut her eyes at me challengingly.
Well, I accept your offer. I'm not that good, though.
She confessed with rosy cheeks, and once again, my heart soared. I doubt that. I was kidding, though. You don't really have to.
No, it's cool.
She assured, walking over to a rock and sitting on it before opening her case and pulling out a dark brown acoustic guitar. She took a deep breath, and her fingers stroked the strings. I don't mean to sound cliche, but when she started to sing, it completely captivated me. I mean, it was unlike anything I've ever felt. I sort of just stared off into space, taking it all in, feeling the sunlight on my skin, the waterfall and river babbling soothingly in the background. I was totally lost in the moment. Her timbre was high and light, but womanly. At some parts of the song, her voice would get soft and airy, and at other parts, she sang powerfully and loud. Her emotions saturated the music, giving me goosebumps. It was a hell of a performance to whip out for a total stranger, but her choice of such a brazen first impression totally paid off. I was completely dumbfounded and couldn't hope to hide it on my face. When she finished her singing, she gently ended the song with a little more guitar playing. Then, she smiled at me nervously. All I could feel at that moment was limerence.
Oh no.
She giggled.
What's with the baffled look? Was it bad?
No. I shook my head incessantly, still trying to process what I just heard. Not at all. Just, ow. It was absolutely phenomenal, like I was in a trance.
Aw.
She shrank back, becoming noticeably embarrassed.
No, it wasn't.
What do you mean? That was incredible, Leona. I mean, I felt like I was high or something. What was that song called?
I Know by Fiona Apple. It's supposed to be for a piano, but I think it sounds all right on the guitar.
All right. Leona, that's literally the prettiest thing I've ever heard.
Okay.
She blushed.
Your turn. Let's see a poem, Sam.
Well, see, that's where you're lucky. With singing, you could just do it, and if it's good, anyone can tell. It can be about anything really, but if it sounds nice, it's something you can share. With good writing, I don't know, it's just different. Good poems are deep, and it's weird just sharing that, you know?
Oh, I see. Not upholding your end of the deal.
She clicked her tongue.
Well, don't sweat it.
No, I scratched my head awkwardly. I said I show you a poem I wrote. Well, do you want to hear this stupid poem I wrote about a sock my junior year of high school? I was trying to stay awake in class and just jotted it down.
Wow. I play that for you, and you read me a poem about a sock.
She teased.
No.
I laughed, embarrassed.
I'm kidding.
She grinned.
Yes. Let's hear it, Sam.
Right. Well, it's quite duly titled Sock. Silently perching atop the shelf, lucidly worn and torn, bequeaths to me a subtle helm, foot comfort in the morn. Stupid, right?
Oh my God.
She laughed.
Wow. I mean, it sounds good though. Solid meter, well executed slant rhyme.
Well, thanks. I grinned, not expecting her to look that deeply at it. And the rest of the day, all the way until sunset, we just sat around and talked. She played guitar and sang a little more, and when I warmed up to her enough, I showed her an actual poem or two. When it was almost dark, we agreed it was time to get going. So, Leona, am I gonna get to see you again? She seemed to be thinking about it for a moment.
May 5th.
She winked at me.
Be here.
Sounds good. I smiled back, more excited than I allowed my countenance to show. And with that, we parted ways. She said there was another parking spot on the other side of the leap, closer to Clover, and that's where her car was, so I didn't get to walk back with her to the parking grounds. When I got back to my car, I sat in the driver's seat. It was dark now, but the moon was high in the sky over the lush wilderness. The weather had dropped to about 40 degrees, and I turned the heat on. As Leona's face came to mind again, my heart pounded. Who was that? I was floored. Where'd she come from? I mean, wow. I can't believe that happened. I drove home listening to the country station, which I usually didn't do. But tonight, I felt upbeat enough for it.
With every step, I feel I can fly. Your love is a breeze, gentle and kind.
When I got home, it was just past 8 o'clock. My parents weren't home yet, which was no surprise. I went into the kitchen and heated up chicken and rice. Then I sat at the table, taking out my phone. I had a couple messages from Aliana.
Did you see Scott's story? She's all over him. Did you do Doc Pinkman's homework yet? Sam!
Aliana, can I call you? She read the message, and within 2 minutes, my phone was ringing. Hey, I greeted with an enthusiasm she didn't hear much of these days.
Whoa, you're cheery.
Her smooth, alto voice came over the phone.
You won't believe this. You will not believe this, Allie.
What? What?
She sounded annoyed by my high-strung tone.
I went to Loser's Leap today, like usual, but for the first time ever, I ran into somebody up there.
Was it a ghost?
No, it was a girl. A gorgeous girl.
A girl? You met a girl up at Loser's Leap?
Yeah, her name was Leona.
I plugged in my headphones, then sat down, cutting through the chicken breast with my knife and fork.
Allie, she was the prettiest girl I've ever seen in my entire life. Wavy blonde hair, these glowing turquoise eyes, and she could sing.
Allie was quiet for a moment.
Kinda weird you met her up there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've never met anyone there before. I already said that, but that's not the point. I did meet her.
You think she's up to something? I don't know why else she'd be up there.
I rolled my eyes.
No, Allie. She was up there to play guitar by herself. Just like I go up there to write by myself. I go up there a lot and I'm not up to this something.
But you said she was hot, right?
Well, I guess, yeah. So?
So I mean, like, not to sound rude, but you going up there makes sense. But why would she? If she's so hot, like you say.
What the hell is that supposed to mean?
Come on, you know what I mean, Sam.
That it makes sense for a loser like me to sit out there alone. But not someone that's attractive.
Okay, don't make it sound like that.
How else did you mean it?
Look, just chill, okay? Sam, all I meant was you're not necessarily Mr. Popular. You've told me word for word you go up there a lot because you have nothing better to do. Well, if she's from around here and pretty, I'm sure she's driving all the boys crazy. She probably has a lot to do. So why's she up on Loser's Leap? Where the loners go? I don't know, it just doesn't add up.
She went up there to play guitar. She wanted a place to be alone to practice. It isn't complicated.
I guess.
I sat there for a moment. Why couldn't she just be happy for me? Every single time I talked to her, all she did was argue with me or make me sound dumb. I mean, what was even the point of speaking to her? I never felt fulfilled or happy. I never felt like I was talking to a friend. After spending just one afternoon with Leona, I already felt closer to her than I did with Aliana in years.
You know what, Allie? I think I gotta go.
Aw, come on, Sam.
She replied, but I responded.
Every time I tell you any good news, it's like you just try to downplay it and make it sound stupid. Well, it sucks you can't be happy for your friend when I found someone I actually enjoy talking to.
She was silent for a second.
You don't enjoy talking to me?
I paused.
No, not really. All you ever talk about is Scott. I'm tired of it. I already told you Scott is a douchebag that doesn't deserve the unconditional kindness you give him. But you never listen. You let him walk all over you again and again and again, and then come crying to me like it's the first time it happened. All you ever have to say is Scott this and Scott that. I don't care about Scott. I don't want to hear about Scott. If I wanted to know that much about Scott, I'd talk to him. You and I haven't had one real conversation since the 6th grade.
To my shock, I thought I could hear sniffling.
Oh. Well, if that's how you feel, then I guess I gotta go too.
Come on, Allie. Don't make it out like this is my fault.
Whatever, Sam. Glad you found somebody you like talking to.
She hung up on me. I sat there, feeling mixed emotions. Maybe what I said was harsh. There was probably a more tactful way I could have gotten it off my chest. But then again, who was I, sitting there feeling guilty? Besides being a little rude, I didn't do anything wrong. I had every right to feel how I did. If Aliana cared about me, I sure as hell couldn't tell. She never supported me, never thanked me, never acknowledged our friendship. She treated me like a bedroom drywall, something she could vent to before walking away and shutting the lights off. And I was sick of it. I was so used to it, I didn't even realize how bad of a friend she was. But talking to Leona made me realize it. I felt happier and more alive in those couple of hours than I felt since I was 12 years old. And sure enough, over the next couple of days, I didn't talk with Aliana at all. I saw her around school and we didn't really acknowledge one another. And guess what? My life was no different. In fact, it even sort of felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I mean, don't get me wrong, I missed her by instinct. But then I tell myself that the Aliana I was missing had been gone for years. The day I met Leona was April 26, and I counted down the days until May 5th. As excited as I was though, some part of me just felt that disappointment was inevitable. That I sat out there all day waiting for her and she'd never show. Even worse was that May 5th was a Saturday, so I really had no idea when she planned on showing up. I spent my days either dreaming of Leona at work or sitting out at the Leap and thinking about her. Finally, May 5th arrived. I won't lie, I woke up that morning in a cold sweat. As much as I wanted to believe she'd show, somehow, deep inside, I just knew she wasn't going to come. I tried to imagine her stepping into the clearing, seeing her beautiful eyes again, hearing her intoxicating voice. But all I could envision was the hours ticking by, waiting in the hot seat for her to arrive, and finally sulking away back to my car at dusk, alone, and disappointed like always. I got to the Leap around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I brought a basket with some sandwiches and fruit and 2 bottles of sweet tea. It might have been a bit much, but that first impression she chose to make really stuck with me. I figured I'd be brazen too. I leaned against a tree, taking out my pocket knife that never left my side, cutting up an apple and eating it casually. When I finished, I added more to a story I was working on. Then around 3 o'clock, my writing was interrupted. Against all odds, I heard someone walking up the hill. My palms were clammy and my heart raced. I could barely breathe, staring in the direction of the sound. She stepped out of the trees. I met her hypnotic turquoise eyes, her soft, smiling pink lips, her sun-kissed face. Today, she wore a pink flannel and once again carried her guitar case.
Hey, Sam.
She smiled.
Hey, Leona.
I grinned. My entire body was alight with thrill and relief. She came over and sat next to me, and I breathed in her perfume, withdrawing an ecstatic sigh.
So, I brought us some lunch.
She smiled, opening the picnic basket.
I got sandwiches and fruit. There are ham and cheese, turkey with mayo, and peanut butter and jelly. And then some apples and bananas.
Aw, Sam.
She smiled at me.
You brought me lunch?
Yeah. And
I stuck my hand in the basket.
here,
I handed her a bottle of sweet tea. Hope you like sweet tea.
This is so thoughtful.
Really? It was nothing.
We spent the day together, talking, laughing, telling one another all about our lives. I told her about Aliana, how we'd been inseparable from preschool until 6th grade, and then how she became popular and started to write me off. I even told her about the fight we got into a little over a week ago, and how we hadn't talked since. I told her about my parents, how they were mostly never around, and how I spent my time either working at Shaw's with people twice my age or writing at Loser Sleep. She told me that Clover was a lot like Sherman, with just a slightly bigger population of 6,000 and a similar situation with only one high school in town. She told me that she was decently popular, but she didn't really like any of her classmates. She said they were all fake, with materialistic priorities, and she had no one to really talk to, at least beyond the surface level. She said that guys were all over her, treating her like some trophy they were all competing to obtain, but that none of them actually took the time to just sit down and get to know her. She said her home situation was a lot like mine. She was also an only child, and her family was mostly never around. But her father was Clover's very own chief of police, and he could be really controlling, which added a lot of stress to her life. Still, the more we talked, the more I realized our lives were pretty similar. She said she started playing guitar and singing when she was 10, and it was something for her to do when she was bored and alone at home. At first, I wondered if she could really relate to the loneliness. Maybe she didn't spend a lot of time with people, but unlike me, it was her choice. She was swimming in attention, invited to parties, approached by classmates. She didn't have to spend a single weekend alone if she didn't want to. But the more she explained it, the more I realized just how unfulfilling her situation was too. She was enveloped by people that didn't really care about her, just wanted her for her looks, and no one tried or cared to understand her. I began to really sympathize with her. That had to be isolating in its own way. We stayed out there until dark. This time, before she left, she did something that surprised me.
Well, Sam,
She smiled at me.
it was fun. Until next time.
May 13th.
I nodded.
Can't wait.
She looked at me for a moment. She embraced me. Her soft arms wrapped around me, and I breathed in her scent, feeling her chest pressed against mine. I was paralyzed with butterflies.
Thanks for getting to know me, Sam.
She whispered softly, her warm breath trickling into my ear.
Of course, Leona.
I whispered back, awe-stricken. She leaned back and then softly kissed my cheek. She looked immediately embarrassed about it, chortling with rosy cheeks as I stared at her in wordless bewilderment, probably looking like a complete and utter idiot. Then she turned, walking off into the woods.
Next Sunday.
She called again.
Next Sunday.
I called back, my heart firing on all cylinders.
Have a nice night, Sam.
The old lady departed, walking off to her car.
You too, ma'am.
I called back, standing behind the cash register. It was Saturday, May 12th, a week from when I last seen Leona. I was on a closing shift at Shaw's and couldn't wait to get off work. All night, all I could think about was Leona. Tomorrow, I was determined to get her number. Then we could talk all the time. I stared at my watch. 8:52 p.m. Just 8 more minutes, and I could start the closing procedures. Then, to my surprise, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I scanned the area for my manager, Luther. Ascertaining he was nowhere in sight, I pulled out my phone, wondering who on earth had sent me a message. It was a Snapchat message from Aliana. Wow, I thought. How damn bizarre. We hadn't spoken at all since the phone call. It had been 3 weeks. At around 10 o'clock, I finally clocked out and walked through the chilly night to my red Accord in the starlit parking lot. I climbed inside, turning the heat on, then tapped the message, surprised by how nervous I was to do so.
Sam, I miss you.
This shocked me. I couldn't believe she'd even noticed me gone.
Hey, Allie, I miss you too.
I went to shift the gear to drive, but she already responded. Surprised, I read the next message.
Can we hang out tomorrow? It's been way too long.
Sorry, Allie. I'm meeting Leona tomorrow. Maybe Monday?
Oh, all right, sure.
Hey, wanna call tonight?
Okay.
I drove home. At last, I slid out of my work clothes. I got a hot shower, then crawled into bed, lying beneath the warm covers. I called Aliana, and for the first time in weeks, I heard her voice outside of her Snapchat story.
Hey, Sam.
Allie,
I smiled, and it actually brought me a lot of comfort to hear from her again.
I've missed you.
You too, asshole. Making me message you first?
Yeah, sorry. So, how's life been, Allie?
Not much to talk about, but some good news.
Yeah?
I gave up on Scott.
What? You did?
Yeah, you were right, Sam. Scott is an asshole. He really is. The other night, I found him with Elise at Jack's party in his parents' bedroom. Not even Abby.
Wow. Sounds like Scott.
Yeah, so, how's everything going for you? And how are things with Leona?
It's going great. Honestly, things are going great for me. I know I've only hung out with her twice, but when I'm with her, I just feel understood. I don't know, it's really something. I can't wait to see her tomorrow. I basically spent all my time just sitting around and looking forward to the next time I see her.
Wow, she's really something, huh?
Yeah, she really is.
Well, get a picture of her for me next time, so I know you're not making it up.
She smiled dully.
Oh, alright. Sure.
Why have you only seen her twice? Is she really busy or something?
I don't know, I just never asked to meet her anywhere besides Loser's Lab. She just tells me the next time she's going and then I meet her there. But tomorrow, I'm gonna try to get her number so we can talk more.
Well, that's awesome, Sam. I'm glad it's working out for you.
Me too, Allie. Me too. I haven't been this happy in a while.
Allie didn't say anything for a moment.
Sam, remember when we were like 9 and you caught that walleye? It was absolutely huge.
Yeah. That thing was like 5 feet long.
And we cooked it up for supper. We just sat out there by the river all night, telling each other ghost stories and stuff. I miss that.
You do?
Yeah, I mean, that was fun. We should do something like that again sometime.
You and me? Go camping?
I was speechless.
Yeah. I mean, unless you think it'd be weird or something.
Nah, Allie. I'd totally love to do that. But wouldn't you, be busy at a party or something?
No, I won't be. Maybe next weekend?
Maybe. I'll see when Leona wants to meet next, okay?
Oh, alright, cool.
Her tone changed.
You good, Allie?
Yeah.
The rest of the night, we talked casually. I won't lie, it was awesome hearing from her again. It reminded me how much she meant to me, that even though she was different now, she was still, after all, my best friend. The next day, I excitedly drove up to Loser's Lab, blasting Led Zeppelin in my car. I couldn't believe that so many people were afraid of that place, and yet for me, it was where I was more alive than anywhere else. When I got there, this time, Leona was waiting for me. When she saw me, she ran up and hugged me. once again, I was hit with butterflies. We talked for a while, but finally, I mustered up the courage to ask,
Hey, Leona, do you think that maybe I could get your number? Or like your social media or something?
I don't have social media.
She admitted.
My dad's pretty protective, and my number?
She seemed to be debating it, but then she frowned.
I don't think it'd be a good idea. I'm sorry, Sam. Really, I wish I could.
Oh, well, I get it. Seriously, don't sweat it.
We can keep meeting here, though.
She smiled.
Okay.
I smiled back.
Well, if not that, can I get a picture of us together? Maybe this sounds creepy, but when we don't see each other for a while, I sort of wish I had at least a picture of you to look at.
Aw.
She blushed.
Sam, I just don't like taking pictures of myself.
Please, Leona.
Not today. My makeup's horrible.
No, it's not. You look great, Leona.
Sam.
She whispered. To my surprise, she extended her hand, cupping my cheek. My body was paralyzed. Her soft fingers caressed my face as her hypnotic turquoise eyes stole my breath.
I don't mean to be so dodgy. Can I make up for it with a kiss?
With what?
I stammered. She smirked. Then her eyes shut and she leaned in, pressing her soft lips against mine. I could hardly breathe, if I'm being honest. All throughout my life, I heard so much about platitudinous things like true love's kiss, fireworks, sparks, blah blah blah. But the two girls I'd ever kissed felt nothing like that. Me and Aliana kissed in the first grade. We didn't even know what we were doing, just saw it on a TV show and tried it out. Then in 8th grade, I kissed a girl, my first girlfriend, though I didn't feel anything for her really and only agreed to date her because I thought it might be fulfilling. This kiss, however, was incomparably different. It left me spellbound, completely absorbed in the moment. It was something more than just two people's lips touching. It was magic, electrical connection. I don't even want to know how cringy my expression was when she leaned back.
You kissed?
Yeah. Sorry.
She giggled.
Don't apologize. It's okay, Leona. The thing about your dad and stuff, it's okay. We'll just keep meeting here.
She looked a lot more touched by that than I would have guessed she'd be.
Yay.
She breathed. For the next 2 months, we saw each other just about every weekend. Sadly, Allie and I never got around to camping. I suggested meeting up with Leona and Clover, but she reminded me that her father was the chief of police, and if a cop saw her with me, he'll tell her dad. Then, we'd probably never see each other again. Obviously not wanting to risk that, I was okay with just meeting at the lab. Still, when I was lonely, I listened to the recording I secretly taken of her while she was singing because she was too shy to outright let me film her. By the end of July, the two of us were dating. And though I don't think Ali believed me that she was real because Leona wouldn't let me take a picture of her, every time I offered Ali to come out to Loser's Lake with me to meet her, she said she didn't want anything to do with that place. Though seeing Leona was awesome, she was getting increasingly depressed with every visit. She told me more and more about her controlling father and how she felt like he was suffocating her. She said that sometimes she honestly did think I was the only good thing in her life. It broke my heart, but if I'm being totally upfront, it also kind of warmed it at the same time. How could I be lucky enough to be the one who was there for her? I was so honored I could be the one to cheer her up. It was now July 18th, a Wednesday, and I was out at Loser's Leap writing a poem. That Friday, I was scheduled to meet Leona again. At around 6 o'clock, to my shock, I heard someone coming up the path. I wondered for a moment if it was Leona, but when a stranger stepped out, I instantly felt on edge.
Oh!
The woman gasped. She seemed to be in her early 30s. She was tan, with dark hair and eyes.
I'm sorry if I scared you.
I apologized.
No, my bad. I just didn't expect to see anyone up here.
Me either. So, what brings you up here?
Oh, well, does the name Cassidy Byers sound familiar to you?
Cassidy Byers? Kind of.
She committed suicide here 10 years ago. 10 years ago to the day, actually. I'm her sister.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
It's okay.
She sat down on a rock.
Yep. 10 years ago today, Cassidy took her life here. I guess I was just coming out here to pay my respects. After all, that grave of hers is empty. Her body was never found. So this is the real last place she ever was.
I don't know what to say. I'm just so sorry that happened.
You know, it's like they say, you learn to accept it, but you never really get over it. I could have been a much better sister to her. I really neglected her back then. I didn't realize until it was too late.
Hey,
I tried to console her, noticing she really needed someone to talk to.
it's not your fault.
Maybe not. But maybe there was something I could have done. You know? Sorry, I'm sorry.
She sighed awkwardly.
None of this is your problem. You probably just came up here to be alone.
No, it's fine. If you need to talk about anything, I've got nowhere else to be.
Well, I mean,
She was clearly troubled and couldn't hide it on her face.
What is it?
Look, I'm sorry to be dropping all this on you. There's something the papers never published about Cassidy. And sometimes it just really bothers me.
The words made me uncomfortable.
What is it?
She used to come up here to meet somebody.
She revealed. The hair on the back of my neck stood up.
I can't remember her name now. It was so long ago. All I remember is that she would come out here to visit with someone. Said that she was her only friend. I'd always ask her why she never had her friend over, but she'd tell me her friend's dad wouldn't be okay with it or something. It never made sense to me. She kept inviting me out here to meet her, and finally, one day, after she'd left, something just didn't feel right. I decided I'd come out here to meet her friend. I got to the parking grounds and saw Cassidy's car, and walked the trail all the way up here to the leap, but...
She seemed to tremble.
What?
I asked calmly.
She was talking, but there was nobody there.
What? I whispered.
She was having a full-fledged conversation with no one.
My body was covered in goosebumps.
Yeah.
The woman nodded.
I know, I was terrified too. I thought that maybe I could hear another voice. There was definitely no one there besides Cassidy. I walked out of the tree line and Cassidy yelled, "Hey, where are you going?" Then she turned around and told me I scared her friend off. But nobody ran away. Nobody left. There was no one there besides Cassidy and me. I didn't even know what to say. I told our mom about it, but she didn't believe me. And I can't really doubt her. She was sure I just missed the girl somehow. And then sure enough, one day, Cassidy came out here to meet her friend and disappeared.
Do you think she was like, I don't know.
Crazy?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe she was doing drugs. I really don't know. But with the rumors about this place and then that happening, listen, something about this place just isn't right. I know it's pretty and that out here you can get to be alone. Cassidy used to say all that stuff. There's something evil out here. That's why Cassidy and so many other people before her took their lives here. I just know it after what I saw that day.
I'm surprised that after seeing that, you'd come out here by yourself.
Well, I'm not totally alone.
She admitted.
My husband's in the car. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, he's supposed to come up here looking for me. But I just wanted some alone time with Cassidy on the 10th anniversary of her death, or disappearance, or whatever.
Well, I'll give you some time alone. I started to walk away, but she called.
Hey, just be careful coming up here, all right?
Uh-huh. I will. Thanks.
Waves are rolling in, dark clouds start to spin, heavy in my chest.
Ever since that night, losing sleep for the first time ever creeped me out. When I got home, I sat at my desk and Googled Cassidy Byers suicide. Some articles came up, all about how she one day simply disappeared after coming out there. None of them specified her meeting a friend, except one, which included a testimony from her sister stating she'd been visiting someone on the leap. Police searched for suspects, but found nothing. The more I looked into it, the more I realized how mysterious her death was. For the first time, she didn't seem very depressed. No one really saw it coming, and then one day, she simply disappeared and it was ruled a suicide. She didn't have a lot of friends, and her family said they felt responsible for not giving her enough attention. But still, she didn't seem suicidal to anyone. Out of curiosity, I decided to look into the history of Loser Sleep. A lot of the deaths were rumors, some proven untrue and others plausible, and the Native American story was folklore, impossible to validate or not. But then, I looked into Ricardo Elias's death. Something about his that confused me was that unlike the popular legend described, he wasn't cornered by law enforcement on the hill. Police simply found his body at the base of it on the riverbed and discovered that he was a draft dodger from South Florida when they eventually identified him. When his corpse turned up in the paper, numerous townspeople explained that they'd seen him around for a couple of months, and that though his mission to escape conscription was unknown to them, when he first arrived in town, he seemed to be in a hurry, and then, mysteriously, he settled down and didn't leave. He even got a job as a woodcutter, and his employer said he didn't come across as suicidal at all. Even though it was assumed the pressures of getting caught and sent to prison or Vietnam eventually drew him over the edge, he wasn't close to getting caught. He didn't show suicidal tendencies to anyone that interacted with him. And then, I looked into Mike Merkel's death in 1986. It was harder to find specific information about him, but to my shock, his story sounded similar to Cassidy's. A lot of articles detailed that he was lonely and showed signs of deep depression, but one of them explained there was a police investigation into his death being a homicide and that perhaps he was pushed. A close friend of his mentioned he'd been meeting a girl there. A girl named Leona. Police searched for Leona in Sherman and the towns nearby, but the one and only girl they met with the name didn't fit the description. A young woman with blonde hair and light eyes. When I read that, I can't describe the terror I felt. I mean, what were the odds? It couldn't be a coincidence. The article went on to say that they were dating, but Mike's friend had never met her and she only met with Mike at Loser Sleep. Just like my Leona. His story and Cassidy's story were identical to mine. I was meeting a Leona at Loser's Lake who would never meet with me anywhere else. She looked like the girl described in Mike Merkel's homicide investigation. Blonde hair with light eyes, and just like Cassidy's sister had told me, she mentioned having a controlling father that made it impossible for her to meet me anywhere else but Loser's Lake. Still, she was Leona. Leona, my girlfriend. The girl who I thought about all the time, who would sing to me and read my poetry and take my mind off my boring, pointless life. How could she be some monster? Some evil spirit or something? It couldn't be real. I would have laughed if it wasn't so painful and unnerving. On Friday, after school, I ran into Aliana before I left to go to the forest.
Hey, weirdo.
She smiled at me, flickering her straight brown hair out of her face, her big green eyes centered on me.
You going out to your creepy little hill?
Allie, my voice carried an unusual seriousness, and I could tell she picked up on it. Listen to me. If I don't text you in 2 hours, send police to Loser's Lake. All right?
Whoa, what? Sam, what are you talking about?
I don't really know how to explain it. I'm gonna tell you all about it tonight, though, okay? Looks like you were right, though, Allie. I smiled at her. There is something wrong with Leona. I never should have doubted you.
What do you mean, Sam? You're not thinking about jumping?
Of course not. I'm not suicidal, Allie. I grabbed her shoulders, looking into her eyes. I'm not suicidal. So, if you find my body at the base of that hill, it wasn't a suicide, okay?
Sam, you're scaring me.
Allie, I hugged her. Listen, it's going to be okay, all right? I'll call you tonight. I ran off. I got in my car and drove away. She watched me the entire time until I exited the parking lot, staring at me like it was the last time she was ever going to see me. As I drove to Loser's Lake, I felt a strong mix of emotions. First and foremost was fear. I didn't believe in ghosts. I never did. But the odds. What were the odds that all the deaths will line up so precisely with my situation? It wasn't conventional at all. And on top of that, why did Ricardo and Mike and Cassidy really die? Did they kill themselves? Were they pushed? Were they manipulated into jumping? I didn't know anything. I just knew that Leona didn't make sense anymore, and neither did their deaths. And worst of all, whatever happened to them was happening to me. The next feeling, the more powerful one, was an amalgamation of sorrow and betrayal. How could my beautiful Leona be trying to kill me? Could she really be trying to hurt me? The girl I sit with and look out at the river, talking with about anything and everything for months on end, showing her my poetry, listening to her beautiful singing. It just couldn't be. Part of me felt embarrassed that this had to be all a ridiculous misunderstanding, and then another part of me even felt angry. Angry that I was being lied to. I knew how I'd find out for sure, though, what Leona was. If she were some spirit, or if this was all a massive asinine conspiracy theory. I pulled up to Loser's Lake. For the first time, I felt nervous stepping away from my car and into the forest. I walked up the trail that had brought me so much catharsis, excitement, and tranquility. But now, all it brought was trepidation, anxiousness, and longing. When I got to the hilltop, I could see Leona through the trees. Slowly, I took out my phone. I went to my camera and held it up. Before my eyes, Leona sat beneath the branches, her head between her arms. And on my camera was absolutely nothing. My heart froze over. I placed my phone down on the tree branch and started recording, aiming it at the hilltop. Then, I walked into the clearing. Leona looked up at me, tears streaming down her face.
Sam?
She whimpered, trudging over to me. She collapsed into my arms.
My father, he found out about me coming here. He's not letting me come back again.
Once again, I felt a turbulent mix of emotions. I was heartbroken to see her crying. I was terrified that this murderous paranormal figure was alone with me in the wilderness. And I was in love with her, wanting nothing more than to wipe her tears away and make her feel better. What do you mean? I went along with it.
He asked me where I've been.
She sniffled, her turquoise eyes red with tears, now locked with mine.
I just didn't have a cover-up anymore. He'd heard all my excuses. Sam, he's not letting me come back out here anymore. He probably has half of Clover Police Department looking for me as we speak.
What does this mean for us? She was silent for a moment.
That's it. We won't be able to see each other anymore.
Despite everything I knew, this crushed me. Leona. No.
Sam?
She sounded broken at first, when her tone changed.
Sam.
She looked up at me, a sternness in her eyes.
Let's end it. Let's kill ourselves. Together. I don't want to live without you. And what else do you have, Sam? Allie-Ann? Your shitty parents? Let's just die together. Hand in hand, my love.
I couldn't help but imagine Mike Merkel standing here in her arms, tearing up beneath his glasses. Seeing Ricardo abandoning everything for love, escaping Vietnam and prison with her in his arms. Cassidy's nodding as she decided death would be better than losing her only friend. But I couldn't resist playing the act just a little longer. No matter where she was, no matter what was happening, I was in love with her. I never want to lose you, Leona.
Come on, love.
She kissed me tenderly.
Together. We'll die together.
We walked over to the ledge of Loser's Lake, looking out over the river and at the wilderness beyond. It was breathtaking, even now. Leona's warm fingers curled around mine. Then, I took a deep breath. Is this the same thing you told Mike and Ricardo and Cassidy? She froze. Slowly, her head turned toward me, meeting my eyes.
What?
I know, Leona. I know about their deaths. What really happened? What are you, Leona? What do you get out of this? Why do you do it?
What are you talking about, Sam?
I sighed a long, bitter sigh. Then, I shoved her off the cliff. For a moment, her body descended to the riverbed below. Then, to my complete and utter disbelief, she simply faded away into thin air, simply ceasing to exist. I stood there a while, simply looking out onto the ledge, wondering what had happened. All I could muster was that she was some sort of siren or succubus, preying on people's loneliness and feeding on their soul when they finally gave in and jumped off the edge of Loser's Lake. Perhaps she was some god that Abenaki worshipped and was simply exacting revenge on the people that had taken her people's land and so audaciously called it theirs. Who knew? One thing was certain, though. she would never condemn another soul to death again. I walked back into the tree line, grabbing my phone. The entire encounter was recorded, and though you couldn't see her, her voice was able to be heard the entire time. I brought it to the police, and they looked into it, finding no sign that I altered the footage. Even though they didn't necessarily believe me, the rumors of Loser Sleep's faceless ghost and nameless apparitions became the tale of Leona the siren who preyed on the lonely by the river. Without a doubt, if anyone started to experience what I had, they'd realize the severity of the situation they were in. At least, so I hoped. They wrote a newspaper article on it, and I knew I'd get made fun of for it. But hell, I was already the town loser. At least maybe this way, I could save a life. The rest of the summer was odd, not having my lonely perch on which to write anymore. But you know what? It was fine. Because Aliana and I had a lot of camping and catching up to do.
This concludes our story. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.